Welcome to Technology Brothers, the most profitable podcast in the world. Today, we are covering Max Meyer's latest edition of Arena Magazine. You've heard us talk about it before. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of literature that you can buy. Quarterly magazine from Max. If you don't know Max, great guy, great follow on X, some great posts, talks about a lot of different things, works with Joe Lonsdale at 8VC, and has started publishing this beautiful magazine all about techno-optimism, technology companies, business.
Making the moon a state.
Everything. He covers tons of stuff. And it's just beautifully made. You really have to go and pick one of these up. He has a deal. It's not that expensive. I think it's $100 a year, $25 a pop. And it's something that you could just have on your coffee table and people could leaf through. And it's so well. And you know what the best thing about this is? Monetized from day one. Beautiful ads in the very first edition.
You see that ramp ad in there?
Yeah, fantastic. This ramp ad's great. There's a great levels ad. There's tons of beautiful ads in here, which we love to see. And
this is just a good example of, even if you're monetizing through your users, you should still, directly via subscription, still run ads, right? Yeah. I want to see more Substacks, paid Substacks running ads.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And he said something interesting where he's like kind of building this community of advertisers. I think 1/3 of the tech stack that he uses to build the magazine and run is an active advertiser. Yep. So it's kind of like a one hand washes the other situation. But there's just a beautiful layout. You can just see that you just don't get this in any other magazine. It's just very rare, and it's just so fun. So many interesting pieces.
It's the same level of I don't know, when I was a kid, I subscribed to Popular Science.
Yeah.
Which these days is probably like popular propaganda. Yeah. But the same level of excitement that I used to get as a kid getting Popular Science in the mail, which was just like euphoria. Yeah. I get this with Arena now.
There is one. I have to take one issue with this. It's printed in Canada. Canada?
Where?
Yeah, it's some far off place, and so hopefully they can clean that up, because I don't know what's
that actually like feels a little off.
But
you wouldn't want it to rub off.
No, definitely not.
Well, put on some gloves.
But a ton of interesting articles in this edition. They have a whole deep dive on Rahul, who you might know as
Ligma.
Ligma.
Mr.
Yes.
Ligma.
The Ballad of Rahul Ligma, Rahul Sonwalkar. And how he built his company, and it goes through his prank at X, formerly Twitter, outside with the box, one of the greatest moments in tech history.
The reaction time on that is incredible, and only a real poster could have done that, because oftentimes when a news breaks, you have 20, 30 minutes to get a banger out.
Yeah.
And he didn't even just get a banger. He physically got there with a box.
I had dinner with him the night before this happened.
Yeah.
And he was not planning. He wasn't talking about this.
It was of the moment.
He just woke up and just did.
Just like most posts are created in the moment, right?
And the acting, like you can see it on his face that he's just like so
incredible
sad
actor.
that he got fired.
Yeah.
It's so funny. And there was a time when like these types, there's a whole movie about this. It's called like the Other Guys or something, where this comedy troupe basically figured out how they could go on the BBC, and they would act like they were oil executives and be like, yes, we're really sorry for what we did. We're giving away $10 billion, and the stock would drop and they would get sued if they didn't have any money because they were just trolls. And it was like amazing. And this was like that. This was like that level.
Well, the funny thing is I remember that happening, and I knew Daniel, like I'd met up with him. I'd actually, funny enough, met up with him at Erewhon once. Cool. And so watching that unfold live, I was like, wait, this is like obviously not real. But even a large part of X like didn't know that it was a prank.
Yeah.
Everybody was pranked at once, and it took like a while for people to be like, wait, these are posters. These are not.
He was texting me as the day went on, kind of talking about like, hey, all these journalists are like hitting me up now to like tell my story. We were like, do not say anything. Just like let the meme live. You crushed it. And it just led to all these incredible meetings. I mean, here's a picture of him with Jensen Huang. Here's a picture of him with Elon Musk.
No, it's amazing because they both parlayed that into building like very unique, very interesting businesses.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally
they didn't get hooked
sectors.
on the stunts. They didn't become content creators, but but it's just fantastic. And I mean, there's a bunch of other cool articles in here. There's one, I mean, look at this, there and back again, celebrating the
catch,
the SpaceX catch,
the greatest catch of all time.
Fantastic. Just so nice to see these in print. Then a beautiful ad for Intercom.
Nice.
And some questions about Canada.
Yeah, I guess the question is like, if you're running a scale up or even an early stage company, why are you not advertising in this magazine right now? Because it's such a way to signal to the tech elite that you get it and that you're cool. Yeah. Even if your brand isn't even that cool by itself. Yeah, and it's a really lovely tour of like the new generation of tech founders. Like Nor Siddiqui's in here for Orchid Health, and and you'll see her and other people mentioned in this article also in like the Jason Carman S3 video series. But then now this lives in like the print world as well. And there's a few different kind of like, it's almost like the media junket. When you're doing like a promotion for a movie, you'll go and you'll do like Jimmy Kimmel and then Fallon and then Colbert or whatever. And the tech version of that is like, you do a Jason Carman S3, you go on Dorkesh or you go on some other podcast, and then you write an article for Max in Arena. Yeah, if I was a Series A stage founder right now, I'd be trying to get a feature in this magazine at all costs. Because how do you get in front of a more curated group of people in tech? Yeah, San Francisco strikes back, and just like wonderful layout, wonderful to look at. Open source defense capital, mission to Europa. Just beautiful. I love this. I'm excited to read through this more. I just received it in the mail 2 days ago. But we wanted to do a deep dive today on kind of the lead hero piece of this edition. And did you read the actual letter from the editor where Max writes America Punk, the whole thesis of this particular the first page particular edition? The second page. So the first page is Max introducing the corporation name, a message from the president of the Intergalactic Media Corporation of America, very bullish on making humanity multiplanetary. But what I found interesting was his article on America Punk, just this idea that you can wind up, this really struck a chord with me, because his basic thesis is like good things are good, but it's sometimes boring to say that. And so he kind of walks through like capitalism is good for a bunch of reasons. It's lifted 2 billion people out of subsistence poverty, and it's the greatest engine for human flourishing since we've captured fire. And people will say, oh no, that's bad. Going to space will be very expensive. The idea of learning is racist. Western medicine is racist. And so there's these wars between like, bad things are good things are good. But at a certain point, it becomes boring to just say good things are good. It's boring, really boring. It's a tautology. It's what your dad believes. And once you admit that good things are good, then you have to spend your time making and defending good things, which is hard because good things are often hard to do. Well, it's funny because it actually became countercultural to be like, no, capitalism is amazing. It did. Right? It did. I feel like as a 28-year-old, I grew up in a school system in which the teachers, which ironically the American public school system, the teachers were saying like, here's all the issues with capitalism, and like really fixating on the issues, not talking about the advancements in medicine, education, housing, all these different things that have allowed for human flourishing. Yeah. And so Max argues that but even if defending good things isn't very interesting, it's still important. And so good things need to be made cool again. America needs to be made punk. America needs America punk. Yep. And so as one of the world's best things, America has a problem. It's currently very boring to defend America. As of now, supporting America means your dad waving a flag on the 4th of July, your mom scolding you to be more grateful at dinner. Defending America means a solemn forced flag day singing in elementary school. But if you wanted to defend America in a cool way, how would you go about doing it? And his answer is that you'd celebrate rebelliousness, the spirit that made the country. There's nothing cooler than a rebellion, and that's America punk. And so he wants to separate it from these visions of the future that are like steampunk, cyberpunk, atom punk, that are too narrow around a particular technology, and refocus on the spirit of the American people, which I think is very, very interesting. So grab a flag in a magazine, tell your friends to join the party, because if good things are good, then defending good things is better together.
And then he says, thanks to
well
everyone.
said.
And it's just a very, it is an interesting thing that like techno optimism has become consensus. There's this idea that, everyone is posting like, oh, the next 4 years are going to be amazing, unbridled techno capitalism.
I mean, that is very much we are in somewhat of a bubble, even though it's overlaps with the real world, but we still need to continue doing it, even though it's mainstream within technology now.
Yeah. But there's something about like when you're on top of the world and you're, just winning and it's very consensus, like there's nowhere to go but down. Yeah. And that's very risky. So I think he's right to identify that, we need to think deeper about what like raw technology actually means, which I think is good that he's doing thinking now instead of in a year when people are like, oh yeah, it's boring. Like I'm not into this. I'm not motivated by this.
Yeah. And that ties into Joe's piece though, which is it's not enough to just be excited about technology. You actually need to, and I think a lot of the technology billionaires out there are starting to realize that there is, you sort of can reach a level of impact in the private markets, and then to have the next order, of magnitude of impact, you need to get involved with government.
Yep.
Because it's a huge critical aspect of our society, and the people that run the government and the decisions that they make have a massive impact on our quality of life, and so many different systems, from mental health institutions to
this is a massive
prisons.
This is a massive shift from a decade ago, where Balaji gave that talk at Y Combinator called Silicon Valley's Ultimate Exit. Are you familiar with this? So there's this, I forget what his name is. There's some philosopher, and he basically said, like, when you're living within a society that has a particular government, you have a few options: voice, exit, and something else. I'm blanking on all of this, but basically it's like you can stay and fight and try and reform the government, or you can leave. Yeah. And Balaji was part of the libertarian crew that was like, let's go to maybe New Zealand, let's do seasteading, let's do ice steading, let's do interplanetary colonization. Let's leave because things are so broken we can't fix it. And that was the dominant thesis of most Silicon Valley elites for a long time. Yeah. And only recently I feel like people have shifted.
No, my personal sort of personal anecdote here, during COVID, living in LA, things were getting so dark. Yeah. I mean, it sounds silly saying this, but like they didn't let you go to the beach. You really basically couldn't be outside. It was crazy. So I was like, why am I living in California if I can't go outdoors and be away from people?
And Joe left California during that time.
So and I got very caught up in that. Like my experience in like April of 2020 was like on Zillow, looking at property in Austin and Miami, and getting very caught up in that. And fortunately, I decided to stay in California and sort of like try to have a small impact. So that ended up being like, I ended up backing like a city councilwoman who came in and made a tremendous impact on the West Side, right? Ended up more recently supported our new DA, Hawkman, who is going to have an incredible impact, sort of cleaning up the city, making crime illegal again, doing things like that. And so I decided to say, like, no, I was born and raised in California. I'm staying here. I'm going to make it better, even in small ways. And if people with agency just decide to leave, things will just get worse and worse and worse. So
I just looked it up. It's Albert Hirschman: Exit, Voice, and Loyalty. So you can leave the government that you're under, you can have a voice and try and change the government, or you can just be loyal to the government. And I think no one in tech wants to do the last one. That's why I couldn't even think of it, because no one's advocating for that. But it is interesting that Joe went through a period of exit with regard to California, but has chosen to opt for voice within.
Well, it's also he didn't exit the United States.
He didn't exit the United States.
And he started University of Texas, or what's the name of it?
University of Austin.
University of Austin, which is like, hey, we actually need to create these sort of like hideouts where we can build the movement without,
So you can think of them as kind of like long America, short California, which is like a totally reasonable trade. And so this is fascinating because, you think of him as like, Palantir, like almost PayPal Mafia-esque guy, very libertarian. And yet he's writing this article that's literally called How to Spend $1 Trillion. And so the drumbeat of the technologist and the libertarian for so long was just spend less, spend less, spend less. And he's completely reframing this thought experiment to say, what happens if you get a dozen top entrepreneurs in the United States together and just ask them, how would you spend $1 trillion? He's not talking about buying artwork or planes, the type of things lottery winners might spend a new fortune on. Rather, how would they spend public money to strengthen the future of American society? And suppose further that you could skip the red tape. How would it be different than the way we currently spend trillions? And so he breaks this down into 9 parts. And I love all of these. They're very pragmatic, but they're also very techno-optimistic. And it's just a fascinating tour of all the different problems in America right now and how you could go about solving them if you were very aggressive with the spending, but also very like laser focused. So the first proposal he has is for $200 billion. The
small price of
crushed
$200
traffic
billion.
And the cost of living in our 50 largest metropolitan areas. And so his argument here is that the annual cost of traffic congestion in Texas has reached over $1,000 per commuter in wasted fuel and time, with the average commuter losing 54 hours in traffic each year. And LA residents, as you well know, lose over 80 hours in traffic per year. For you, it's probably 80 hours a month.
80 hours a month. No, for me, I wouldn't say I lost it because I'm either doing deals or listening to Founders Podcast, right? There's no in between.
It's all about frame of mind.
Yeah, yes. Frame of mind.
But or charging $10,000 an hour on intro.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
if you're making money while you're on the call, then you're good. But basically, he's saying Los Angeles can't build a subway tunnel for less than $1 billion per mile. How could $200 billion meaningfully improve 50 cities? The answer is competence. I once wrote the mayor of Austin about new technology with proven economics, tunneling. And so he's advocating for building more tunnels, most likely through the Boring Company.
So the Boring Company is like that sleeper company in the Musk portfolio that
everyone
could
hates it. Dude, if you go on YouTube and you search like Boring Company update, it's just all of these communists posting videos of Elon Musk with a clown nose on. And they're like, it's not working. It's not working. And it's like, you don't realize that you're giving him the attention. Like you could have made those same videos about Tesla for 10 years when they were barely shipping any cars. It's like, you don't understand how this works. Like he spends 20 years on something, and then all of a sudden it's like, fuck, there are tunnels everywhere. Like there's maybe too many tunnels. It's like most people would say like there's too many Teslas out there now.
Yeah. So my roommate worked for the Boring Company. My roommate the first year I lived in LA out of school. And he ended up moving to Vegas because that was like where they could get a deal done, and they're building out a bunch of tunnels there. So I'm excited. I mean,
and people love to harp on, the tunnel got some water in it, it's flooding, it's failed, and it's like maybe but maybe not. Yeah. Maybe he'll just keep working on it and he'll just fund it forever until it works. But the very like fundamental like economic physics, like the laws of physics around the project, to me are just so obvious because it's like you have a resource, which is essentially land underneath cities that's extremely valuable that no one has access to.
Yeah.
And so if you can get access to it, that's just incredibly valuable.
Yeah. Theoretically, there's way less laws if you go 100 feet underground than above ground, where it takes $1 billion to make a mile of track because there's so much regulatory burden and approvals needed and we need to buy this person's property for some egregious price because 10 square feet of it touch where the track would be and all that kind of stuff. So just the solution is just go underground.
And I think there was a change in the law where you used to, if you bought property, you used to own technically essentially everything from the core to the earth all the way to the sky.
Yeah.
And then eventually they said, no, there is a cap so planes can fly over you and stuff.
Yeah. And they did that underground. It used to be that if you owned a piece of land, you could pull as much water from the aquifer below you as you wanted.
Yep.
And now everybody's like, no, this is actually a shared resource. You can't just pull as much as you want.
Well, have you ever been on the Red Line out to Harvard in Boston or in Cambridge?
No.
It's the craziest thing. So you're on this train that's just going straight, like subway. It just works really well. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it slows down and starts screeching goes, as you're pulling into Harvard. And the reason is because in 1776 or something, George Washington wrote a letter to Harvard and said, I am granting you this land permanently, no matter what, cannot be revoked under any circumstances. And so they own the land forever and all the way to the core still.
No
they
way.
have some like they have some like different definition of what real estate means for them.
Yeah.
And so when the subway came, they were just like, no, which is really stupid because it would have been
No
so
way.
much better for everyone if they just been like, yes.
Self-owned.
but yeah, it screeches around the corner to get there because they were like, no, like you can't dig under us. Like,
that's our dirt.
We own everything.
Yeah.
And our proof is a letter from George Washington.
Yeah.
Like because they were there before the country.
Yeah,
Like it's older than the country, I'm pretty sure. I think it's like 1600. It's crazy. So Joe maps out a couple more stats. He says, while saving over 90% versus above ground infrastructure with costs of a single tunnel about $10 million per mile, adding a second direction in some places as well as stations and egress about every mile brings the total cost to $25 million per mile. In 2020, we mapped out a sample Austin system for $1 billion connecting the airport, several downtown locations, and the Q2 soccer stadium. The project has more connections than the proposed $5 billion above ground rail line at a fifth of the cost. For $5 billion, it connects a much larger area.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with tunnels is it's actually like a very good fit for like robo-taxis because it's such a more controlled environment. You're not going to have like a dog run through the tunnel or like some kid come out of school and run out or like cars doing crazy
the current
stuff.
Tesla like
could
full
do
self-driving system could easily do that, no problem. And is like that's kind of what's happening in the Vegas.
Yeah, and every time you think that like I would love to see like the Walt Disney had his like, master plan multi-year of like how all of his companies interact. Yep. Like I'm sure Elon has his version of that.
Oh,
He's like, we're building the robo-taxis, which will be ready when like all of my tunnel networks like come online. And then like every, 50% of people that move in the United States will be in like in one of our tunnels or like one of our cars or both at the same time.
It really is just like Musk Inc. 100%. So let's go to number 2. Joe Lonsdale says, for $100 billion, take back our prison system from incompetent bureaucrats. Says America has 2 forms of Stockholm syndrome in its approach to criminal justice. Coming from the extremist left, there is a desire to coddle violent criminals and allow repeat victimization in the name of social justice. But across the political spectrum, there's another problem: the total capture of the prison system by bureaucrats, unions, and corporations whose incompetence we tolerate. Speaking of Stockholm, when the American criminologist Francis Cullen won the Swedish government Stockholm Prize, he proposed to spend $10 billion in new prisons. His framework was as follows: 10 prisons will be developed, each funded at $1 billion each. A competition of proposals would be undertaken in which states would partner with criminologists and prison experts from around the world, as well as from private enterprises, to set forth a model for prisons. Each prison proposal must be shown to a rational scientific and to nourish the development of prisoners. In each proposed prison, each prisoner must be engaged every day in activity, education, work, or treatment. And there would be ongoing process and outcome evaluation by a team of researchers. The Cullen framework is a fine start, but if a bit idealistic. Not all prisoners need to be nourished. Some are hardened killers to be locked away. But approximately 600,000 people leave prison each year, and an estimated 95% of prisoners will eventually return to our society. And so
this segment on like paying for, there's been a few paying for performance, like almost like recruiter style, where if you work with a recruiter in tech and they don't find you anyone good and you don't hire anyone, you don't really, maybe you pay a little bit, like a small retainer, but you don't pay much. And the same concept is being has been applied. It was applied in. He talks about how it was applied in Arizona, where the state allowed county governments to collect up to 40% of the cost savings to the state when fewer people under their parole and probation supervision went back to prison. And so that incentive just made the institutions actually care about the long-term outcomes of their prisoners, which I think is fantastic.
Palmer Luckey actually said that he was thinking about doing private prisons before starting Anduril. And Anduril was just like a much bigger, much more important job, but he thought that there was an interesting, and it is crazy that he mentioned that like maybe 5 years ago. I'm surprised that no one's run with it, and we haven't seen like a venture-backed prison startup. But I think
that sounds like a task for Will Manitis.
Probably.
Will and Theo can do that.
Maybe
for their next big one.
Yeah, I mean, like if Palmer's throwing out ideas like that, you would think, but it's not enough to just say like, oh, Palmer like validated the idea, so I'm running with it. Like it's clearly like
it takes a very special person to be able to do that and thread the needle. And
also it's just I'm sure it's a very rough like industry to work in. Like my mom was a nurse in prisons, and it's just brutal at every level, like from like the sheriff department, like while she was there, I think the sheriff like went to prison because like he was like super corrupt. Like,
well, what about all those, there were a handful of tech elite that went to prison because they were paying to get their kids into schools, and so we need to go after those people who like experience the prison system and be like, hey, let's make a change here.
Martha
like,
Stewart,
you understand the product, right? Like, let's like make this better. But you know, when people will post a picture of like a Nordic prison, and they'll be like, they'll try to like critique it and be like, look how nice this prison is. Like, I'm sure that people just want to go to prison. It's like, nobody wants their freedom taken away. Our prisons should be places that allow, in general, like there's people that are too far gone. I strongly believe that just need to be locked up forever. Like they just, didn't fail the test. Like you should be gone. But then there's this whole contingent of people that obviously should be in an environment that is conducive to personal growth, to learning, to even just being in a mental state that allows them to think more positively about life, right? And like build their self-esteem back up, because going and being thrown in effectively a dungeon is not going to be conducive to the mindset that you want those people, when they are those 600,000 people that are released every year, you want them to be in a mindset where they don't hate the system, right? Because then they're just going to continue to rebel.
I wonder what Martin Shkreli thinks about prison reform. I bet he would have some very interesting takes.
He talked about at Hereticon. He talked a bit about his experience in prison and why you have Diddy and SBF in the same prison in Brooklyn. But longer conversation there.
Yeah. Let's move on to part 3. Joe says, for $100 billion, build 21st century mental health institutions. So very related to the previous point. We'll read the lead in here. At the peak of institutionalization in 1955, nearly 500,000 people in the United States were in mental hospitals. The 1962 book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and the movie 2 dramatically changed how Americans viewed that system. And not totally without reason. The system had obvious defects and needed reforms. But generations later, after we ended nearly all institutionalization, we have a serious crisis in our society. Many people with serious but treatable mental illnesses that would have benefited from institutionalization have been left to prison and the street.
So this was the thing that stood out here. This guy, Christopher Rufo, found that in his home state of Washington, the per capita number of state mental health hospital beds had declined by over 90% since the 60s. And anybody who's been out in the real world like would probably guess that like our mental health issues have not sort of reduced by 90%. And you can see that on the streets. And, I know I was talking to a CEO that like a very successful like founder CEO, talking about his family's like battles with bipolar and how alone you feel when you're dealing with that, because it's literally like it is 100% on the family to provide that level of care, and there's almost like no quality resources that can help kind of like address that. And it's incredibly challenging to deal with.
Yeah, it's interesting because at least in California, there's this story that might be somewhat apocryphal that like all of the mental health institution closures are due to Ronald Reagan. And I'm not sure how true that is. I'm sure it was like a process, but it's fascinating because it's actually a very libertarian and somewhat right-wing philosophy. But if you look on a political compass, there's like left-wing libertarianism, right-wing libertarianism. They're kind of two different things culturally. But there is a libertarian argument to say, you know what, keep the government out of everything, keep the government out of my mind, keep the government out of what I do. If I want to sleep on the street, that should be my freedom. But the argument that I've heard that's much better and much more convincing to me is that no, like as a society, we have a duty to step in and help people who are suffering. And it is unacceptable to let someone do drugs to death on the street. And
Yeah.
we have a moral duty to step in, even if that does have a little bit more of an authoritarian bent relative to the libertarian, like you can just do whatever you want. But it's odd that like the libertarian position has kind of been adopted by the left to some degree, because you would normally think that of someone who's like, well, no, I don't want my tax dollars going to a mental institution. And no, if I go crazy, I want to be able to do whatever I want. Like, stay out of it. Right. Yeah. That's kind of a libertarian position. And yet it's become like the standard on the left, very oddly.
Yeah, which is why, I mean, I think this entire piece is a very interesting perspective from Joe, who's very libertarian in general, to just like take an opinion of like, okay, like I'll run this exercise of how you might, because the money's going to get spent one way or another.
Yep.
It's like a venture-backed startup. Like if you raise, the United States raises like $5-6 trillion a year, like they're going to spend the money.
Yeah. Let's go to number 4. Proposal number 4 is for $50 billion. You can make our inner cities a place where children thrive. Lonsdale endorses Brad Gerstner's idea to give every American child. Oh, whoops, that's the wrong one. Lonsdale proposes spending $50 billion to replicate successful community programs like the Harlem Children's Zone. I hadn't heard about HCZ. Have you heard about this?
No.
Because it's funded by Jeffrey Canada and Ken Langone and Stanley Druckenmiller. And it covers an area of 100 blocks in Harlem. And apparently it's been remarkably successful and very, very high ROI. And so his argument is just like, we need to scale this, the one program that's actually working, basically just like put more wood behind fewer arrows. Confronting issues directly, such as a need for male role models and addressing maternal drug use. The program has significantly improved test scores and future income prospects for participating children. And there was some stat in here about, I love this one. The benefits to the public are enormous. Converting a high school dropout to a high school graduate is worth more than $250,000 in public costs over a lifetime.
Incredible.
So, hugely. This is exactly like where the government should be investing.
Yep.
So I love that. Scaling such models would involve rewarding programs that achieve measurable positive outcomes, aiming to reduce intergenerational poverty, and creating environments where children can succeed. Love it. There's some great pictures from the Harlem Children's Zone.
Yep.
Step 5 is for $100 billion, give every American child a stake in our economic future. And
so this has been something that Brad over at Altimeter has been talking about for years, and is actually making some substantial moves on, because it's really not that great of an investment to give every new child in America $1,000 in an index fund the day that they're born.
Okay.
And over time, through compounding, it'll become like a very meaningful amount of money that would help them buy their first home, pay for college, and teach them about the power of compounding growth, which we understand here on this podcast, because we went from 0 to 1,000 followers on X in, a few weeks. And we're going to get to that second 1,000 follower mark, 2,000, in about 7 days. So people, like, the more that we can educate the youth in this country on compounding growth and be able to not just like learn about it, but experience it directly, I think that'll be very powerful. Yeah.
It is really hard to get hooked on long-term compounding growth.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy to experience the euphoria of buying a lottery ticket. Like, I still remember the day I bought my first lottery ticket, and I was like, I'm going to win. Like, this is happening for me. And it was the only lottery ticket I ever bought.
Yeah.
But for that like week while I was waiting for the numbers to come up, I was like completely delusional. And I was like, of course I'm not going to win. Like, this is so stupid. I should never do this. But it's very hard for something that grows slowly. So imagine if like over the first 10 years of your life, you're just watching this account go up and up and up, and you're just like
not being able to touch it.
Exactly.
Because
So
like the other thing is
this psychologically at a very young age.
We're we obviously love bubbles and speculation and being risk on, but kids are getting exposed to meme coins in like middle school now, which is like an unregulated lottery. Like you have to be 18 to buy a lottery ticket, right? So these kids are able to go in middle school, buy Solana meme coins, and they think they're going to turn $17 into $3 million, like that guy did with Peanut. But it's teaching this sort of like experience of instant gratification and low effort for potentially extreme ROI. But it's basically just encouraging, gambling or lottery ticket buying. So it's a big issue.
Step 6 in Joe's plan is for $50 billion, restore the American industrial skill base.
Yeah. So this reminded me a few episodes ago. I was talking about a guy that I used for like handyman stuff, and he was telling me like, "Oh, I'm learning how to like build websites," and I told him, I was like, "That's great, but like, you realize there's infinite other things that you could do that you're probably already like more competent in. That if you just really specialized, you could make a very meaningful like 6-figure income and have like very little competition in doing that." We don't need more people that know how to build websites, right? We need more people that know how to do like, I think somewhere in this article.
The example is tooling engineers. So he opens with Apple CEO Tim Cook once remarked, in the US, you could have a meeting of tooling engineers, and I'm not sure we could fill the room. In China, you could fill multiple football fields. And this is why they're kicking our ass on iPhone and electronics manufacturing
broadly.
Is because there's so many integrated parts and there's so many little CNC engineers, little all sorts of little tools that need to be made, and the tools that make the tools, like there's like 20 layers deep in the supply chain, and we've just lost so much of that.
Yeah, and I think we're in this amazing moment in time where we have like a bunch of friends of the podcast that are building, people like Aaron, the Dirac kid, I forget his name,
Phil.
And Phil, right? So people like Aaron and Phil that are building manufacturing company here in the U.S. Hadrian, Deterrence, so many important companies, but what they're going to run into, like a big challenge is not even just making these new manufacturing systems, but is a talent thing, right? Like how do you actually find people that are qualified? And a lot of these companies will end up in a place where they're like, we have 6 open roles that are all 6-figure jobs, and we don't know where to find these people, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually good for the people that do know how to do it, but a lot of those people are retiring, right?
Yeah.
They're not. We need a new influx of manufacturing talent, and these are very like, they are jobs that require you to like use your hands and use your body, but they're jobs that will give people real dignity over going and working at Chipotle, or going and working in the McDonald's drive-through, because you're being very productive. You're like producing things that matter, not just producing junk food. And
there are some risks. Have you heard of the Sonoran Desert Institute, SDI? Have you ever heard of this?
No.
Okay, so it's a very popular sponsor on gun YouTube. So gun reviewing YouTube, they often say, if you're interested in getting into like the manufacturing gunsmithing, you should go to the Sonoran Desert Institute, which is an online college, blew up during COVID, and they teach you like the basics of how to use machinery and use tooling to become a gunsmith and go work in the arms industry. Very cool idea. And the economic model works very well for them because they're GI Bill compliant. And so if you come back from the military and you have GI Bill dollars that you could put towards college, you can put that towards SDI. Now, there was a bunch of criticism recently about SDI not actually driving better outcomes and kind of just giving you like very basic,
it's tough
high-level
because
stuff.
Like gunsmithing is such a
Tactical,
need to do like a lot of these things like are better suited for an apprentice model.
Exactly.
So I want to see trade schools that have government incentives that then feed you into apprentice programs and people like I always tell, I told, my handyman buddy, I'm like, go find somebody who's very talented at one specific thing and offer to work for them for $30,000 a year and do 12-hour days and do that for 2 years, and you'll come out of that being close to an expert, right? Like you'll learn enough during that period.
Yeah, so Joe's solution here, he points to Texas in 2014. They aligned incentives and funding for its technical colleges and started paying the schools based on how much the student earned. They can fake graduation rates, they can fake teaching skills, but they cannot fake the results, income. This approach resulted in a doubling of the total amount of money being made by students in just 6 years, money that goes back into Texas through local taxes. When bureaucrats have a strong financial incentive to deliver better results, they will. And I love that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, just like there was an explosion of like effectively trade schools for software engineering, the same exact thing. You could do that for machining, plumbing, electrical work, all those sort of like, specialized categories.
So let's go to number 7 for $200 billion. One of the bigger ideas, create better funders of science in America. Lonsdale proposes allocating $200 billion over 10 years to establish new competitive funding bodies for scientific research, challenging the dominance of institutions like the National Institute of Health. He argues that the NIH has become risk-averse and bureaucratic, often stifling innovation by creating alternative organizations that reward high-risk, high-reward research and empower young scientists. The U.S. can invigorate scientific progress. This is something we were just talking about in that group chat.
Yeah, I think venture capital has like stepped into here to some degree because they'll be like, you know, the Long Journey team will like give some like researcher basically like $200K to 2 cap to be like just work on this like weird idea for a couple of years, and that's like cool, and we need that, like that's risk capital, but our government should also be giving like basically risk capital to like important sort of scientific pursuits. It
goes to that discussion we were having in that group chat about like invention versus discovery. Just this idea that, you know, some of the biggest breakthroughs in science have been more discoveries than inventions, not very diligent. It wasn't really us working
lizard
at something.
venom.
Yeah, lizard venom is a good example with Ozempic, but even penicillin, I think it's this. Our friends were referring to it as the gentleman scientist, the person who's just experimenting and testing things and then just lucks upon something really so many
important discoveries.
And it's very hard to facilitate that these days in the traditional academic institutions or the typical tracks where it's like there's a certain amount of time you have to publish a paper, you have to get this many reviews and this many citations, and it's become too rigid. And so he definitely wants to pull back from that.
So one thing that, you know, he suggests is saying that like a public scientific funder would be filling in and funding research gaps where innovation isn't profitable. And so there's so many drugs that potentially have impact in like areas that they weren't initially like approved for, that are non-profitable to fund research in, because you might have to spend $20-50 million like proving out that something works, and then it's a generic drug. So there's no like margin to be made or like edge or like IP that you can create. And so there's so many different areas where that applies. And honestly, it's like oftentimes like bro scientists that are like doing this like research like on themselves, right? In many ways, like Brian Johnson is doing a lot of this on himself, where he's just like, I'm going to spend millions of dollars like figuring out how to sleep like 5% better, because that's going to deliver like the best.
Some of the greatest, I mean, we're seeing this all over the place, where I think Gwern is probably one of the most respected like researchers on stimulants. Josie Zahner developed like her own vaccines during COVID and was like testing stuff on herself. It's crazy. And then Ayla has like one of the most, she has one of the largest data sets on like sex related social science, and can put out research that's like way more robust than anything you'd see today. So there's this weird model shifting to just like these independent researchers. And but yeah, I mean, I think Joe's, hopefully it seems like he's optimistic about retooling some of the funding that does come from the government to drive innovation within these organizations. But let's go to number 8. He says, for $100 billion, upend the energy future and put degrowthers out of business. And his argument is that if you invest $100 billion to revolutionize the energy sector by promoting abundant, clean energy production, particularly through nuclear power and carbon capture technologies, he criticizes the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's obstructive processes and advocates for its reform. And I've heard this so much from all the nuclear folks, that there are, like, when you're getting a new reactor design approved, you have to have an actual hearing for things that are completely uncontested.
Yeah. There's they had a funny quote in here where the NRC was bragging, and they said the 12,000 page application took less than 42 months to review. Can you imagine being the guy like building something and put together this like 12,000 page application that probably like could have been years. It probably could have been an email, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you wait 42 months. Just to figure out if like you're good to go. That is just like criminal, in my opinion.
It's terrible.
And
he includes this incredible graph here of the cumulative nuclear construction permits and operational plants over time. And you can just see that after the 70s, the number of new operational plants just completely flatlines, and there's just no new development. And I think it has started to tick up again, but it's nowhere near like the asymptotic curve that we thought we'd be on with energy too cheap to meter. So very, very, very depressing, but hopefully there can be, really significant overhaul of the NRC. Joe advocates for starting by abolishing the NRC's awful incentive structure, conceived as a cost-saving measure, but which has backfired awfully. Congress forces the NRC to fund its budget through fees paid hourly by the very companies it regulates, not unlike a law firm or consultancy. If you were funded to regulate by the hour, how long would you take? It's like the worst possible incentive.
Same thing with like the cost plus model within defense. You know?
Very, very
like
bad.
If you're getting paid based on how much something costs, like you run up the costs.
Yep. And let's go to number 9.
Personal
for $100
favorite.
$1 billion. Give back the rest of the money. In his
What a
final
statement.
proposal, Lonsdale recommends returning the remaining $100 billion to the American people, emphasizing the value of individual liberty and economic freedom. He believes that citizens are better equipped than central planners to allocate resources efficiently. By giving the money back, perhaps through tax rebates or direct payments, individuals can make their own choices, stimulating economic growth and just demonstrating trust in the populace.
Yeah, so he positions this very well, which more people should understand, is that when the federal government does things like a quote-unquote stimulus check, they position it as a payment or a tax rebate. And that effectively implies that the money was never yours in the first place, but it was your money that the government effectively took from the citizens and the businesses, institutions in our country. And, I think that the government should position that more of like, hey, we're giving you back. We sort of overtaxed. It's your money.
I always like to joke
spend it how you wish.
Did you know that every single year the United States government collects enough money in tax revenue to give every single citizen a 100% tax rebate?
Is that?
They could give every single person 100% off their taxes, but they keep all the money for all these projects. It's just a tautology because obviously whatever they take from you, they could give back.
right.
but it sounds shocking.
It sounds very shocking.
It sounds like one of those stats that's like, if they could give everyone $1 million, but no, it's really like whatever they're taking, they could just give back. But so they have to justify what they're giving, and it has to make sense. And I think he has some great proposals there.
Yeah,
and
people don't realize that like income tax was illegal for a while in U.S. history, right? It was it was something that the founding fathers were very against, and the foundation of the country in many ways, because it was like us telling the Brits, hey, look, like we don't like these taxes, like let's end this.
Yeah, we've kind of like wound up with such a hodgepodge of like corporate taxes, income taxes. There's taxes on all over the place, and people wind up moving around the country to find like their optimal blend. But
a blend.
I think the most interesting thing with this is definitely to close on is that there's a shift from just burn it all down, stop everything to let's be more efficient with the money.
Yeah, and I honestly like that. I think Balaji.
It's more incremental.
Balaji's like consistently had extremely interesting ideas and been right on a lot of stuff.
Yep.
And the area that I just strongly disagree with him on is he's like very like pro like exit, like let's just leave and like rebuild from the ground up. And I think that experiments like that should be run. At the same time, we want the best and brightest in America to be focused on how do we make this place a better place for everyone.
Exactly.
So it's a great movement.
I love it. Well, thanks to Max for publishing that in Arena Magazine. You can go pick it up and give him a follow because it's a fantastic publication.
Subscribe to the magazine.
Subscribe to the magazine.
Before we dive in, should we indulge in a beverage?
Yeah, sure.
Always have a bunch of...
and thank you to Enchiladas Surfboards. We received some beautiful koozies that we're enjoying very much. They're certified for milk only, but we're drinking Celsius in them. So
making
we'll figure
it work.
it out. Hopefully it works. How do I do this?
Today we have organic coconuts. We always... Let's see, it's a product of Thailand, so it came off the boat. I like that they send it in the nature's packaging.
Do I pull this off?
No, you pull that off, and then you go like that, so you break it, and then you can pull this little thing off.
Okay.
Pull off the top, and then you got a little straw here, little microplastics. Take this off, and we record for many hours here in the studio, so it's good to have a little... we're like endurance athletes that need a little like sugar boost along the way. So these are delicious. I think I got a little coconut meat in mind, so it's
Me too. I'm pretty jammed up.
But we'll make it work. And thank you to Melissa's Organic.
Okay, now it's going.
Coconuts.
That's good. Delicious.
I
love that.
I think we have some.
Let's go to some DMs.
Do we have some personnel news?
Oh, yeah. So we have a new segment on the show, Some Personnel News, where we are tracking the biggest moves, the biggest pickups, who's entering free agency, who's getting long contracts in tech. And our first deal or move of this show is...
Yeah, I mean, this is breaking news
massive
in the tech world, folks. We have a major move happening, and it's shaking things up as we speak. Brandon Jacobe, yes, that Brandon Jacobe, former product designer at Square and Cash App, the guy who's had his fingerprints on products used by millions of people, is officially making the leap. And after an absolutely electric stint as a first hire at Party Round, where he built a product that was the talk of the town, Brandon Jacobe is now joining, you heard it here, second X. You heard it first on X. That's right. X just landed, an absolute stud. And I think it's worth telling you a little bit about Brandon Jacobe. This guy is a grinder. We're talking 20-hour days in Figma every single day. If it's 1 a.m., if it's 4 a.m., Brandon is there, locked in, pixel perfect, making magic happen. Nobody, and I mean nobody, knows their way around Figma better than this guy. His taste, impeccable, attention to detail, unmatched. Low ego, high output. We're talking about a technician, a craftsman, a relentless perfectionist.
An absolute dog.
So what does this mean for X? Well, they're bringing in a player who doesn't just make products. He makes phenomenal products. He's been in the big leagues, building for millions of users, and now he's suiting up to take X's game to the next level. This isn't just a hire. This is a franchise-altering move. An absolute dog by every definition. Watch out, tech world. Brandon Jacobe's coming, and he's ready to dominate. You have any details on the contract?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's an absolute dog. I think, the details weren't released of this deal, but you probably think it's, 4-year deal, maybe 1-year cliff.
7-8 figures.
Big deal for him. I mean, just look at the stats he's picked up. Former Rookie of the Year contender, potential future Hall of Famer, pushed millions of pixels every year, day out. Extremely technical, extremely detail-oriented, and I'm really excited to see what he does this season.
He's coming to a platform that we all use and love.
It's
the foundation of this podcast and our livelihoods, and we're excited to get this level of talent working on the product that we spend hours in that feed every single day. So thank you to Brandon for this move.
Congrats to X on the pickup.
Big pickup.
That's great. Let's go to some Q&A. We got a DM. We got a question from Mickey with the Blicky. He says, "Hey guys, VC Mickey here. I got some great advice last week about angel investing and starting small. I decided to take your advice and basically put my entire net worth into XRP. It's now up almost 80% over the last week. Can you guys offer any tips for risk management?"
Man, my only advice here would be rotate out of that.
Is this real? Did XRP really moon? I can't tell if he's joking.
I don't know.
I love
Mickey,
it.
I love the...
It's up like 100%. Here we go.
I love that risk-on attitude. Here's what I would say. If I were Mickey, I'd be rotating into other risk assets like early-stage startups. And the reason for that is I think that illiquidity is a feature. When you got something like XRP that's moving 100% in a week, get into something that's illiquid, get into something that's marked on maybe like an annual basis, something like a seed-stage startup. Just so you can go focus on other things, right? A lot of people get caught up into day-to-day price action with crypto, and that can be a huge distraction from actually creating enterprise value in your job, in your company. And so anyways, get into something illiquid, lock it up, lock in the gains.
I like that.
And,
that's a good
and go long.
Yeah, good luck out there. Our next DM comes from an anonymous poster who writes in, "Hey, do you have some time to enlighten me on your experience with creating a consumer packaged goods company? How did you validate the market? I have a group of talented individuals that hit me up about an idea I shared publicly, and I'm evaluating taking next steps." What do you think? How do you validate the market for a consumer packaged goods company? I've been through this a few different times, and I kind of broke it down as there's two different ways. One is kind of the Brian Johnson way. You start talking about the idea and the problem that you want to solve extremely publicly, become the face of that problem. So for him, it's longevity. For Jocko, it's performance in the gym, this like athletic militaristic style. And then that fan base will buy kind of anything from you. Yeah. The other is more product led, more product driven, where you're doing real R&D, locking up a supply chain, kind of like what the Ridge wallets did. A lot of our early stuff at Lucy was around like FDA applications, patents, stuff like that. It took a long time to get it going. We weren't the face of nicotine. Yeah. And to some degree we still aren't, but we have like a very narrow set. That's
You're
like,
kind of the face of nicotine.
But
it came later.
Yeah, but it did come later. It wasn't like we went like, influencer or brand first, and then kind of were able to sell a commoditized product. We had to do something unique. So I think a lot of it's like, well, what's your edge in this product? Can you be an operational beast? Yeah, and then grow slowly. But what do you think?
Another example. So launching Rora water filters actually tomorrow. Yep. That's an example of validating that opportunity. Was looking at the market. Consumers are already spending billions of dollars on water filters, mm-hmm. so it wasn't a question of do people buy water filters or are they going to want one. And so what we did with that is we took a popular water filter called the Berkey, and we looked at it and we said, how can we make this better on 10 different dimensions, sure. right? So we made it way, way, way more effective. We went and did the hard work of getting it proved out that it actually works. And then we made the design better, the usability better, all these different things that we knew consumers cared about. And so we've spent somewhere in the 7-figure mark on testing and R&D to get the product where it is today. But we know that the product is going to be a hit because we took something that was already out there that consumers liked generally, and we made it dramatically better. Yep. And so I think if you're most consumer products, a friend of the podcast, John Fio, has made products over the years that were like first of a kind. Yep. Something like he made like the gravity blanket. Yep. And something like that's much more binary of like people weren't really buying weighted blankets. Like they weren't really a thing until he created it. But a lot of consumer products are like, even looking at this on the table, it's not like people were already buying coconut water. It was like, hey, can we sell them the same product just like in the original packaging, basically?
Yeah.
Like
one of my favorite stories from Fio is when he launched the Moon Pod, which is it's basically like a big bean bag, but it's even bigger and softer. He realized that he shot some video of, I think it was like a woman falling backwards and getting caught by the bag and just like falling into this really comfy bag in slow motion. And that one asset probably drove like $100 million in sales on Facebook. Yeah, something crazy. And he just knew that like that it was just a few frames. Yeah. It was like almost like an animated GIF. Yeah. But it was, a few seconds and it just stopped you in the feed. And so having that, like, what is the hook? What is this one thing? So there's a bunch of different ways, but to validate the market, it can be like, it's so big and so obvious and you have some innovation, or you're so charismatic and you're this, heroic influencer who's going to have millions of fans buying whatever you sell, or you have some hook that you just know will go viral. There's a lot of companies that have done like stress tests or some other stunt. Liquid Death, good example of like the brand just stood out so much that I'm sure if you ask them, how did you validate the market? Those guys behind Liquid Death would just tell you, well, like we looked at our brand deck that we built and we were laughing and we knew that it was going to be good because it was unique. It was just going to pop. Like they just knew.
Yeah. Every, my wife invested in a company called Graza. Have you seen them?
Yeah.
Which is like a squeeze
olive
oil.
Yeah.
And she invested in that company pre-launch, and she looked at that being like, I know people like olive oil. Yep. They have this like new form factor that was popularized by chefs. They're going to put it into this new form factor, and it's going to work really well on social because it's such a like dynamic way to use olive oil. And so that was, and they got to, I don't know what their metrics are. They'll probably do like 100 million next year, like some crazy number. And so, sometimes with consumer products, like I've found it's very binary. Like sometimes I look at something and I'm like, this will not work. They launch it and it flops. Yep. And then sometimes I look at something, I'm like, this will not work, and it launches and it just rips. Yeah. Timing has a big part to play in it. But then you need to look at like, what is your edge with the product? Like with Lucy, it was like early focus on like the regulatory aspect. With Rora, it was like, let's just spend longer and be more obsessed with design and efficacy than any other company, and testing than any other company in the market.
Yep.
And then something like Graza was like even more simple of like, let's just change the packaging, sell the exact same thing, and it'll work well on social.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, you should be able to boil it down to some sort of elevator pitch that just makes sense and you have a lot of confidence around. Like, what are you doing that's actually different?
Yeah.
And if it's just like, oh, we want to launch this because we think it's cool, like, get out of there. You need to be able to articulate
also,
it much
like,
better.
People that are considering building consumer products, like, you need to go into it. Like, yes, if you have a hit consumer product, you can scale it very, very quickly now. Like, Fio is like a good example of that. When something works, like, he scales it very quickly. But more consumer products, like company like Ridge.com, they'll do like 200 million top line this year, but just operational excellence over very almost slow. Like a decade.
Yep.
And the first, in like the third or fourth year, it was like a $5 million business.
Yeah, but it's like, what game are you playing?
Yeah, you have to understand, like, are you still going to want to do this product if in the first year you do 500K, the second year you do $1 million, the next year you do 3 million, the next year you do 3 million, and then the next year you do 10, and the next year, like, are you still going to be wanting to play that game if it's not a rocket ship?
And it probably means less venture capital. And it probably means higher ownership for the founders over the long term. You look at the stories of like Red Bull, Monster, like these guys, they grind for years and years and years, and then they pop because they're in a big market and they do have the branding and formulation correct, but they own enough to make it worth it. And as long as you get, I think the real key for those consumer goods companies is like, you have to work super extra hard to get over that first hump where you can actually be taking a salary that makes your life like worth living, basically.
Totally.
And then once you're flying business class and like covering your expenses, your kids are in good schools and stuff, then it's like, okay, well, I can grind and compound for a very long time.
Yeah.
But those first years where you're just making no cash flow and it's just brutal, it's just
terrible.
And I think that it's very valuable.
I think that the category that is the biggest trap is beverage, because people look at a beverage like Celsius and they're like, oh, Celsius does billions of dollars a year. They're like, oh, it's so simple. I can create an energy drink.
Little do you know that the founder probably went to every single CrossFit gym for like 4 years straight.
Yeah, and did tastings for 12 hours a day.
Yeah, and was laughed at and like had product defects and problems and all this stuff.
Anything that looks easy, I can guarantee you it's like deeply competitive. And beverage is an example of that. It's like the most cutthroat industry.
Exactly. So we have a new segment on the show, Reply Guy of the Month. Woo. Let's go. Every month we're going to try and give an award to the biggest reply guy for the show. So get out there, reply to every post that we make, quote tweet us, retweet us, like us, all on mom. X, send it around, give us your best replies, because you're going to want to win the Reply Guy of the Month.
This is a great honor. You're going to be on the wall here in the studio.
So this month's Reply Guy of the Month is an intern at Red Letter AI. He's 18 years old. I see great things in his future. Says he's ex-Future Founders. He's at the University of Houston studying econ and finance. Love that. He says he's right EAC. Views are my own. And I didn't even know EAC there was like left EAC or right EAC.
Wow.
But cool for clarifying.
Hardcore.
He's out in Houston, Texas, and he has a wonderful header image of Donald Trump, Peter Thiel, and Tim Cook hanging out
Amazing.
together.
I could see him in that same group at some point,
for sure.
If he keeps accelerating like this.
For sure. And so this month's Reply Guy of the Month is Amit Balesha.
Yep.
Congrats, Amit. You are the Reply Guy of the Month. And he's
a great honor.
I love this about his profile. I mean, good numbers for such a young kid. He joined in April of 2024. He's only been on X for a couple months. He's already got over 1K. This is the Reply Guy territory.
Yeah.
You got to be the Reply Guy to get to 1K. Then you can start doing the inside jokes, grind your way up to 10K. Then once it's 10K to get to 100K, it's got to be the cringe threads. And then once you're past 100K, it's just fake news all the
time. He's on the path.
He's in some community that's highlighted on his profile that just says the Tealists, and it's only 2 members. He has like a community. It's just like him and one other dude.
Him and his dog. His absolute dog.
His absolute dog. Like, could just be a DM, bro. But I like that you're publicizing this. Yeah. And he's followed by another friend of the show, Red Bull Futurist.
Yep.
So,
also
he's got something
a bright
good going
future.
On. So congrats to Amit. You are the Reply Guy of the Month.
There's never going to be another first honorary Reply Guy of the month for Yeah, and to be clear, reply guys is a spiritual thing. Like you can be a woman.
Yes.
Whatever gender can be a reply guy.
Your thing could be quote tweets. You don't actually have to reply. It could also just be spamming our DMs constantly.
Yep. There's a bunch of ways to get here. And there will be many more.
Many more. Let's go to the timeline, and then we're going to start working in some promoted posts. Because we ran a poll, and you guys wanted at least 60 ads in every episode, so we're going to do our best.
Try to get there.
It's going to take us some time to get there, but we're going to do our best. Let's go to Nicole Wiskoff. She says, the gift that starting from rock bottom affords you is having an insane appetite for risk. You've been there before. You can crawl your way out again if you need to. I like that. I don't know. Yeah, she talks about coming from nothing. What a badass story. Now she's running, 50 million AUM?
That's the last fund.
That's the last fund, so it's more.
Quite a bit more. Yeah.
Let's go.
This goes back to the Josh Wolf quote, chips
on shoulders, put chips in pockets. Let's go.
We need a big Josh Wolf quote.
Yes. He's going on the Mount Rushmore of pithy thought leaders.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
Yeah, I think I honestly resonate with this so much that at a certain point, you need to know when to not go risk off, but not continue to risk at all. Because when you're
post YC, our burn rate was $3,000 a month for 3 people. Isn't that insane?
That's amazing.
Because we paid our rent a year in advance. Because we were just like, just take that out of the bank balance so we don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
And I think we were like a credit risk. So we were just
they were like, you need to.
And I think our rent in the Tenderloin, in this like complete disgusting hovel of a apartment.
Yeah.
It's technically a 1-bedroom. It had a closet that one guy was living in. I was sleeping in the living room. and it was $1,500 a month. And every time I tell someone in San Francisco that, like, oh, $1,500 a month per bedroom, like that's not bad. I was like, no, $1,500 a month for the whole thing. In San Francisco.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you're willing to go down to living on $3,000 a month for 3 people that can write software and build stuff and just get stuff done and call people willing to do all of the different problems. It's like, there's just no way you can be stopped. Like, because you can get $3,000 a month from so many different places.
I think more like it becomes really challenging when you have a family because then your kids are in school. There's real fixed costs. And I think people don't really recognize that. I tell founders this all the time. If you're 28 and you want to start a company and you're deciding, well, should I work for this company? It's like, no, go risk on right now, because 4 years from now, you're going to have a kid or something like that. You're going to be getting married, and your fiance's dad is going to be sitting you down and be like, all right, the startup thing was cute, but you're about to marry my daughter. You got to really get it together. But more founders should raise a $50,000 angel round and go live in the middle of nowhere.
Seriously.
And just grind and grind and grind and grind.
I mean, my first fundraise was $17,000, and me and my co-founder made it last 6 months.
Almost made me want to hit the size gong for a second.
With the tiniest
little.
There you go, the tiniest little size gong. But yeah, I mean, we made it work. We spent a lot of it very quickly and then stretched it out ever so slightly towards
I remember running the calculus, coming to LA being if I don't make this happen, I have $1,200 a month to spend.
Yep. I
have exactly until this date to be profitable and be able to pay myself more. And if I don't, I'm dead.
Yep. Let's go to Gabby Goldberg. Second time on the show. She willed it into existence.
I think third.
I think maybe third, but
she's a regular at this point.
Yeah, she's a regular. But we love Gabby here. She says Partiful deserves more credit for making random gatherings great again. And it's a photo of the Jeremy Allen White lookalike crowned in Chicago. There was a Jeremy Allen White lookalike contest, including a toddler dressing up like chefs from the TV series The Bear. Have you watched The Bear?
I have not.
I watched the first season. It's pretty good.
Not a huge
TV guy.
Mostly founders podcasts.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no video.
Yeah.
So I can't stream it. But no, Partiful has gone extremely mainstream.
Yeah.
You have this
it used to just be
it
the
just
tech
be a tech thing,
yeah.
and it kind of proves that tech is mainstream. You can start something and build it for the tech audience and then expand out from there. I think even a lot of things like Whoop and Aura Ring were very insular tech community products. Yeah. But in many ways, I think we should go dig up like the VC thought leadership of like blog posts. Like it's time to unbundle Facebook,
sure.
right? Because I think about like Facebook events.
Yeah,
where that was the thing.
Yeah.
That was the alternative to Partiful, and
maybe
Partiful
X should pick them up and roll that in.
X should pick up.
Partiful?
X should absolutely pick up Partiful.
That'd be great.
Partly because I think it would be I don't think they're monetizing yet. Last I checked, and the CEO's like jokes about this quite a lot online. She's like, we're just like giving this thing away. We're glad people like it.
Do you know like Paperless Post, which is like kind of like the billionaires Partiful, is extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Like you have to buy tokens to invite everyone. They have some sort of like digital currency that intermediates
Paperless
things,
Post
and
is like boomer
so
post.
expensive.
When I see that, like if I'm getting invited to like a VC dinner and it's Paperless Post versus Partiful, I'm like, oh, okay, like this, like
I think it's going to be some ballers. It depends. It could be some boomers or some ballers.
Boomers and ballers. Yeah.
It's one or the other. Let's go to East Village Guy. He says, "Why are you, a grown man, telling me which AP classes you took?" So he's talking about like accounts payable classes, like to learn how to do ramp stuff,
to learn how to ramp better, to close your books.
Okay, that seems totally reasonable. I would love to know what AP classes people take, especially if they're going to be working in a finance org, like a high performance finance org.
Ramp should actually do more to get into the college curriculum, right?
Yeah, because you should be able to take
number
AP.
One. That's the number one if you're in
AP,
finance. AP.
Advanced Placement Accounts Payable.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what we need to be taking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can honestly say I've never had anybody tell me what AP classes they took. It's kind of an interesting thing to know, though. I wouldn't be mad if somebody told me.
Especially with something interesting.
We appreciate continuous learning. So if you took some AP dinosaurs class and like you're still obsessed with dinosaurs and now you're getting into dino excavation expedition,
investing in dinos,
then that's cool.
I like it. I don't see a problem with it. East Village Guy, take it easy. Aaron Slodov, repeat guest on the show, says, "I'm convinced that basic business, economics, money, education should be mandatory in middle school." Here we go. He needs to be taking advanced placement accounts payable. And it's a quote tweet from Union Maid, who says, "I worked an 8-hour shift today on register and made $168 before taxes. I rung up $3,500 in sales in those 8 hours in my little cafe with no seating in South Brooklyn." And so they're kind of complaining.
I hope he was wearing gloves for all those receipts that he was touching.
For sure.
Unless his T is really high, and then in that case, he should use the receipts to kind of bring that testosterone down from the
people
PFAS.
always say this, that like, oh, they should teach how to do your taxes in school, and I couldn't disagree more. I think that you should definitely just be studying like the great books and Shakespeare and the Aeneid and the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah, because there's nothing in life
those are timeless.
Education is like needs to be a forcing function for learning things that you're not going to have to learn in life. And most people will graduate school and never think about Shakespeare again.
Exactly.
When it couldn't be more important.
Yes, and there's a million ways to pick up this on the job very quickly. There's so many other resources. There's a million different ways to consume basic business education through nonfiction.
There's so many great startups that will do your taxes for you.
Exactly. I actually very much disagree with this take, and I think that schools should focus much more on. I think this is a little bit of what's happening at the University of Austin, kind of a return to the classics.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have the great book series right there.
Yeah, and just facilitating
it's very hard to find time to read Tolstoy.
Yeah.
Like that's not something that I'm forced to do every April.
Yeah.
But I will be forced to learn a little bit about the tax code.
Yeah.
And I can figure that out.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with going back to.
And school is like a forcing, like let's force people to do things that are like interesting, right? My dad was a high school teacher, and he taught a class called Project Make, which was some combination of like robotics and programming and wood shop and things like that. And so they would like build and launch rockets like out on the football field, like do things that like maybe the nerds will do on the weekends, but like the average student should be exposed to that kind of thing.
Yep, that's great.
And schools, have a role to play there.
Yeah. So the sales bull says, "We fire HR and pay the sales team double." And it's the picture of Don Draper.
This should be this is funny coming from the sales guy. He's like give me a raise.
Yeah.
Give me a raise.
Yeah.
But anyways, usually paying your best sales people double is like pretty good good way to spend money.
It really resonated. 12K likes. People are really into it.
I'm unsurprised that his following is.
Yeah, but I think this is less how much people love sales guys and more how much people hate HR.
Yeah.
Because HR is always seen as like a drag on the company. But I mean, it's getting easier and easier with more like automated HR tools. Like you can build a pretty sizable company without a dedicated HR person for a long time.
Yeah, you're on Rippling, and then it has so many bugs that you want to,
Yeah. I think you could. I mean, it's interesting that there's not more. Like there's the outsourced CFO, like what do they call partial CFOs? Yeah. It's weird that there haven't been more of those for HR.
No, there are. There's
because that seems like much more like in line with like the startup ethos than bringing.
There's a lot of like $300 a month. You get the software and we'll help you.
And there's
deal
a person,
with, like,
consultant
HR
that comes
issues.
in.
But
is it good?
It's funny because like Chamath got like so much shade for being like HR should be like your legal team, but like the biggest HR issues that people have like tend to be better suited for outside counsel to like deal with because it's like end up being like extremely charged, issues with employees.
I wonder if there'll be a little bit more of like a restructuring of where HR sits in the organization as we go into like the next generation of companies, like how a lot of marketing teams have technical people on their staff now. Like recruiting is obviously super critical in the HR function, and then the general counsel, the legal stuff is super critical. So maybe you should kind of disaggregate it into a finance person that does the compliance stuff,
team building,
a legal person, and then the team person, the team building honestly should just be an extension of the CEO and the culture. So I would want a CEO's chief of staff to decide we're doing a happy hour because the CEO likes this place and this would be great for the CEO to come and meet with all the employees. And then the recruiter should honestly be living within the functional units of the engineering team and live right there and there's be technical. Yeah. So I don't know. I could see like the HR function kind of just diffusing throughout the organization instead of building up like this massive longhouse in your organization.
Massive longhouse.
Massive longhouse.
Yeah. Go over our HR team is over at the Longhouse building. You can use the map. It's like
that would be a good name for the outsourced part-time consultancy for HR.
Yeah.
Just like Longhouse Consulting.
Yeah.
Let us be your Longhouse.
Yeah. Longhouse is a service.
Tio says new life goal, having a tweet printed by the Tech Bros pod. Well, congratulations, Tio. It's happened. Today is the day you got your post printed. I don't know how to pronounce Xeat. I think we live online. Is it Zeet?
Zeeted?
We live so online that like I couldn't pronounce Cryptox either.
Somebody pointed out.
I don't even know Teo. Who knows?
Former like Dylan, who'd been on the show, pointed out. You know how you could say like, "Oh, I'm on tech Twitter. I'm on
like
crypto Twitter, FinTwit."
Yeah.
There is not that same language for X.
Sure.
Like I'm on Tech X.
I'm on FinX.
I'm on FinX. It doesn't exist, and it's actually a key barrier to growth right now because all of us on tech Twitter, Tech X. Maybe we just make it Tech X.
Tech X sounds like TEDx, really dumb version of TED. I mean, the base version's already really brain dead.
We actually need to add TEDx to our enemies list because
so
there's smart people that have gone up there, but
by and large,
some of the worst takes of all time.
The most blue-pilled shit I've ever seen.
The worst takes of all time.
Oh, did you know cancer was cured? Like every single time, every year they have someone stand up and say cancer's cured. It's like, come on, it's not cured. We're not there yet. Let's go to Jen over at Anduril. She says, it's live, AndurilExclusives.com. So they did a drop. Anduril has selected eBay for charity to host this auction. 100% of the proceeds will benefit Blue Star families. And so did you see this? They're auctioning off pieces of wreckages from tests that they've run.
So amazing.
It's basically loot crate drops. There's different tiers. There's rare, epic, legendary tiers.
And they're not using it as a profit center. They're using it to give back, which I think is really cool.
I don't know. Maybe they should be using it as a profit center. I think I'm actually pro-profit.
I just am in favor of companies that generate so much profit from their core products. That they're able to use that same skill set to give back.
And obviously Blue Star families are fantastic, and it's a fantastic charity.
Love Blue Star families.
But I just love that it's a very unique drop. We've been talking about this, how like every company has a t-shirt, but only XL nicotine pouches has a briefcase and a watch and a Rolex. And more brands and more companies should lean into understanding like what is the expression of your brand in terms of merch. I was talking to another founder of a unicorn who I was saying like you're a tech company, but like what if your tech company was a car, like what car would it be? And don't tell me it's a Tesla, because that's what every single person says. I'm a tech company, so the avatar of my brand is a Cybertruck. And it's like, that's fine, but that's also just the avatar of the Tesla brand. You need to express yourself differently. And are you an F-150 or are you a Corvette? Like, those are two wildly different cars. And you should be able to immediately say, based on your brand, oh, we're more of a Corvette than an F-150. Or
the
whatever.
Aurora system's a Porsche 911 of water filters.
There you go. And so this is a merch drop that feels uniquely Anduril, as opposed to just a t-shirt, which I'm sure they'll be selling and they'll sell other merch. But when I think of like the merch that I want from Anduril, I think of like hiking gear, like almost tactical gear, not like fully military
stuff you can wear on the range,
but something that's like that. And I honestly don't even care if it's just them going and finding a great brand and just like, honestly, just throwing like an Anduril pin on it. That's what Founders Fund does a lot. They give out these bags and there's just a pin on it. But they're really nice bags and I really like them. And
you're much more likely to use them.
Exactly. And you can always take off the pin if you want. It's not, they didn't have to go and get like some white labeler to like make them a fake version of the bag. They just give you the actual bag with the pin on it. But it's like it's still like an avatar of the brand, and it's still an expression, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, and brands need to know what they're actually doing with like non-core products like merch. It's like you want to be building connection to the broader community and like likability. And usually a shirt is not the best way to do that. You can get a lot more coverage by doing something like this, where somebody's like, oh, I actually own a piece of Anduril's like drone system that they made and blew up. Right?
It's really cool. And I always love artifacts. We have a lot of artifacts in the studio here. And a lot of the investors at Founders Fund have like a whole set of artifacts from like, oh, this commemorates like the SpaceX deal or the Anduril deal. And I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and I like this too, because if you're very online on X and like accelerationist, defense tech oriented, getting a piece like from here would be amazing. But they can also go give this to a politician and be like, throw it on their desk and be like,
this paperweight.
Don't forget about us.
So, this was blown to pieces.
It's a great paperweight. Yeah.
Well, let's stay on defense tech and go to Ben Coleman. He says, quote, "We have a 5-star general on our board of advisors." True story. And it's the Inglourious Bastards meme of the guy holding up 3 the wrong way because Germans do the 3 this way. You know this meme? And so it's detecting that you're not one of us, and we know that it's not real, because of course you can't have a 5-star general right now because it's not a time of war.
Right.
So very embarrassing for whoever did that. And you really
what I've seen in defense tech is like a lot of there's people that will be publicly out there of like, oh, I'm a general. And then they'll use that to like get sort of advisory opportunities. Really? And then once they're actually in the deck, then they're like, whoa, no, actually like put this like very specific title, like 8th Brigadier, blah. And it's like ends up being much more specified, and it doesn't sound nearly as cool. And so bless their hearts, they're sort of like using that like high level title to like land private market opportunities.
Yeah. I wonder how valuable having a 4-star general is on your board. Because we hear stories about some really helpful people, like Chris Brose at Anduril, like was McCain's chief of staff, came in, like really runs that organization, like full-time employee, like very, very beneficial. But then you also hear stories about like didn't some general join the board of, I think Mattis joined the board of Theranos, and like it was like, what does he know about that? It was very controversial at the time, and like if you're a board member, like you should know. I think that was a story of Mattis or something, but
before we dive into the next one, on the subject of defense tech, we have a promoted post from Allen Control Systems. They say, looking for a fast-moving, high-growth opportunity in defense tech, we are hiring for several roles across engineering and operations. A few of our featured openings are senior mechanical design engineer, electrical embedded engineer, and an Unreal Systems developer. You can view all of Allen Control Systems openings and apply at allencontrolsystems.com/company. # careers. Improve your links, ACS. You guys can do better than that. Anyways, fantastic company. ACS is building AI gun turrets and gun systems for counter drone use. So they basically have built a product that can take out, without any human intervention, drones that are fast moving across the battlefield. And so amazing opportunity. They have their first product is very defensive, but going to save many lives on battlefields across the world. So thank you to ACS for innovating in this space.
Thanks to ACS. Let's go to Jason Liu. He says, if you stayed in Canada, were you truly that ambitious?
Got him.
I love some hate on an un-American country like Canada.
Very un-American.
Yeah.
It's objectively one of the most un-American because
so close. They could say, hey,
they could
we want to be part of this awesome team. We want to join up.
51st.
Let's come over here.
I would be surprised if Canada doesn't try to front run the moon to become the 51st state. Right?
Interesting, yeah.
Does that be kind of like the moon's going to get a lot of attention once it becomes a state and, be the first new state in quite a long time. The 50 is like a nice round number. Being that 51st state, big opportunity. I can see a lot of competition for it, that slot. And Canada, we would welcome you with open arms. I know, a lot of friends of the podcast, Jeremy Gaffon, Sam Poirier.
Jeremy's from Canada?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, because he was at Tiny. He was at
I have no idea.
he was at Tiny. Remember? It's a Vancouver.
Yeah, okay. But he grew up there. He's born there. It's brutal.
Brutal. Oh, based in New York now.
Okay.
So
good.
Thank God. We got a good one.
So he is ambitious.
Yeah.
He didn't stay in Canada.
No, but there's something to be said for at the same time we would welcome Canada, but I respect all the Canadians that are staying there and trying to make it better and fix the place.
Yeah, no, I agree. We love our Canadians.
All my favorite Canadians are U.S. residents, but that's also because I spend more time with them.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. And Shopify, fantastic company from Canada.
Fantastic company.
And University of Waterloo, fantastic engineering
also
department.
Good.
Lots of respect. And a lot of companies have engineering hubs there.
Yeah.
And it is a beautiful country. So we love Canada. Let's go to Unusual Whales. They say, Ken Griffin of Citadel says he's invested in nuclear and it's the future.
I love these accounts they just say something that's just could potentially be very out of context because it's a big account. It's just fact.
Yeah, fact.
Ken Griffin is long nuclear. I want nuclear powered high frequency trading, right? I want to be giving these high frequency trading companies we need to be giving nuclear power to market makers, right? To increase financial innovation and the speed at which money moves.
I actually wonder if energy is a big issue for the high frequency traders. I know that Jane Street is advertising on Dorkesh Patel's podcast, trying to recruit, I believe, CUDA engineers and machine learning engineers. So they've done a lot of AI stuff, but I'm not sure how scale bound they are right now. A lot of their early stuff was very deterministic. It was written in this programming language called OCaml.
Well, and a lot of their strategies were location based. They were how do we get to within 10 feet of where the trade is being executed.
You know that on the NASDAQ, they have a rule where even if your server is closer, there's 1,000 feet of cable between you and the main server, no matter what. So that everyone has a level playing field.
Laws don't work, so we're going to physically enforce this.
Yeah. And I mean, it's Flash Boys has a great anecdote about digging this huge tunnel across.
Probably a good business to be selling
commodities exchange to stock exchange.
It's probably a good business to be selling those 1,000-foot cables because they probably need to be replaced all the time because it's we can't,
it's too slow.
I need to or whatever.
Exactly.
It's got to be fresh.
But I mean, if the trading algorithms wind up moving to something that looks like an LLM where it's very scale bound, you're going to see huge data center build outs it's going to be a new race, just like the LLM stuff. But I haven't heard anything about that. We should dig into that more to see. I mean, I think at this point, he's probably just making the bet on the fact that the LLM companies and the consumer AI companies will need energy for their data centers. So he's investing in nuclear. But this is interesting because, a year ago, people started talking about, okay, what's after NVIDIA? NVIDIA's pumping.
Yeah.
energy is clearly key. Maybe nuclear is the next thing, but it was very much like a cocktail position. People talked about it, but they weren't actually moving the market. Now the market's starting to move, and some of the nuclear stocks are starting to go up.
We talked about this before,
but they're still not as crazy as NVIDIA.
It's worth bringing up again. 4 years ago at Hereticon, nuclear was being pro-nuclear was still heretical. Now it was the most normie take that you could have. So, Ken Griffin is just kind of putting a stamp on that.
Yep. Let's go to Sarah Hess, second time on the show. Can't beat these margins, and it's a screenshot of the rare Anduril relic. Recovered crash component from Anduril R&D tests, and the bid, I mean, it hasn't even ended. There's still 3 days on this, and it's already over $1,000. It's pretty awesome.
Amazing.
And margins are fantastic because
going
of
to
course,
those families.
Yeah, because it's essentially free since it was just wreckage anyway. But
I wonder if anybody figures out that like the actual metals, like if you got the right piece, the metals itself would be like worth
like
the
tungsten
like more
tungsten.
Break it down,
melt it down.
Some enterprising, very.
Well, they do
person.
that with hypercars. Whenever there's a crash, there's a community that will find, like a LaFerrari crashed in this place, let's go and dig through the rubble and like figure out if like maybe some random piece got thrown clear. And we can take that and sell it.
And it's like $1,000 piece.
It's like diving for treasure, essentially.
Supercar
there's like
crashes.
A whole community because like if you get one, like clutch or
little
something,
corner,
it'd be really valuable because they don't make them that much or something.
Yeah,
it's great. Do we have a promoted post?
Promoted post from Nico, runs a company called Default. 76% of qualified leads book an inbound meeting with Default. We try to help customers think of demo requests as ones who fall into two buckets: demo qualified and two not demo qualified. Most of our customers only show a scheduler to leads who qualify for a demo. So Nico's building an amazing platform, an enterprise product called Default that helps other enterprise companies sort of like sort and qualify and book demos. So he's been at this for quite a while, backed by Kraft, and now is starting to see some pretty fantastic results. Became buddies with Nico, a few years ago at this point, and their execution has been fantastic. So if you're dealing with processing inbound leads, go over to Default, hit up Nico, DM him on X, and he will get you. He's the kind of guy that if you DM him right now, he'll jump on to do a demo of the product with you like in like 5 minutes.
Well, only if you're demo qualified.
If you're qualified. So he'll qualify you. That's part of his job and what Default does. So thank you to
Nico's
Default.
Great. Let's go to Val. He says, something that would let us buy and trade seconds from future ad slots would be lit. And so he's pushing us to let the average viewer and fan invest and profit from our
future
enterprise.
ad spots.
So
that's actually kind of interesting. Like if you want to go long Technology Brothers, you should be buying up our 2026 Q4 inventory
reselling them,
and then reselling it when the time comes.
That's great.
So maybe if somebody wants to create a platform and market for this, we'll
I like the idea of like a
it.
dynamic auction size where it's like we could be doing the show live on Spaces and then
we're like, we actually got a higher bidder, or hit the printer.
Print it out.
Yeah. You can buy, if you buy the ad slot within, it's kind of like a car auction where like after the 2-minute thing gets down, if nobody does
continues,
it, you can buy the slot, but then you buy the slot and once it's physically printed, like it's locked in. It's locked in.
Yeah.
The price is locked.
Yeah. He was saying he wanted to invest, and I said, would he prefer a SPAC or a shitcoin or both?
Both at the same time hasn't been tried yet.
Not really.
But could
Trump
be a new
is kind of experimenting with it.
Liberty Coin and Truth Social.
He's kind of got both.
Yeah.
And then also lots of merch drops.
We might.
He doesn't do ad reads though. He should have an ad product.
I'm
just
actually
in the middle of the State of the Union.
So can you
this is brought to you by MyPillow.
Is there a reason that Trump has not done his own podcast? Because the guy clearly likes.
This
very
is the future.
Profitable.
I'm telling you. The future is the president will have a podcast.
The president will have a podcast.
100%.
We should create a poly market for that. Will Trump have his own podcast by 2027?
Well, I think JD will. And I think JD will bring on his like associates and whoever he's thinking. Like, think about all the buzz that's been happening around, like, who's going to get Department of Transportation, who's going to get Commerce, who's going to get Defense. And it's and the way these people are introduced, it's usually like a screenshot of a press release that goes viral. People are like, who's this? There's like a couple mainstream media write-ups, and then a video clip will go viral from whatever that person said on some other podcast. So like they'll be like, this is the new Secretary of Defense, like so based or so terrible, depending on who is posting. And it's just a clip from them on a podcast. But how much cooler would it be if you could just watch, you know, Trump or whoever the president is sit down with the person and say, hey, American people, I'm thinking about this person for Secretary of Transportation. We're going to talk for an hour.
And then you're going to roast them. Roast them in the comments.
Yeah, roast them in the comments. We'll have a poll.
But Trump, if Trump had his own podcast, he could get that podcast to $100 million run rate just on ads.
Oh, totally.
Which would be 100 times the run rate of Truth Social.
Oh my God.
And maybe he could be the first podcast to go public, right?
He could.
And then you could just have you could have all of America own a piece of. So anyways,
I mean, this is the thing. Like, didn't Churchill? No, it wasn't Churchill. It was FDR did like the fireside chats. Those were really popular.
Well, you know how there's like
America weekly things. I think even Obama did stuff that was like weekly dispatches. About like, here's what's going on.
Well, I feel like these are less of a thing now, but isn't there like presidential accounts for? There's an X account that's for the first lady. And when you're the first lady,
there's at
you
POTUS
get to,
and there's at Donald J. Trump.
And
at POTUS changes hands.
Exactly. So Trump's like, I'm not going to blow this. Like, if Trump was actually on the at POTUS account just ripping bangers, like, that account, he's like, I'm not going to 10x this for my future. Like, for somebody who's going to use that audience against me, like in like 4 years.
I would love to listen to a podcast.
I could see JD like booting up at POTUS again though. And
I mean, I think Vivek Ramaswamy is going to do it because he's already doing vlogs and he's clearly understands like the modern media stuff. He's buying BuzzFeed. He can use all the BuzzFeed, resources to kind of craft his own media strategy and really level up from there. Let's go to John Fio. He's been on the show before. The Fiorentino family
made their money in
hospitality.
Oh, hospitality. Yeah.
He's quoting Tony Segura, who says, President Trump, at Real Donald Trump, is requiring Volodymyr Zelensky to wear a coat and tie when he meets the president going forward. And John says, in the same way you weren't trusted if you didn't show up in a slouchy hoodie to a meeting in the last 20 years, we're about to snap back to suits as a filter. You're speaking my language.
Speaking our language.
You'll want to make sure you're wearing a Fiorentino label soon because he has a suit company.
So John came in very clutch at Hereticon. I didn't have time to get my own suit sort of ironed and dry cleaned at the hotel, so I was able to wear a Fiorentino label suit. It was fantastic. Got a lot of compliments. Turned a lot of heads.
That's great.
And was all thanks to the fine fabrics and fit of his label. But yeah, I think it's kind of funny that you remember these like memes where like, if your VC is wearing shoes like this, like they're gonna like try to buy 50% of your company, or like if your VC like is even wearing a suit at all, like you're fucked, And I think that like trends obviously oscillate from one side to another like very dramatically, and it became like the thing to wear like Allbirds and joggers and like hoodies and that so clearly is just like wrong, right? It's the same thing when if you
have over 50 million in AUM, you need to wear a tie.
You called me like very upset the other day because you sat down in business class on a flight next to somebody and they were just dressed like very sloppily, and you were like physically ill from just being like in their presence, saying like, this is so wrong. You should know that if you're flying business class, you should be wearing at least a collared shirt.
At least.
And, we hope that we're on the forefront, with people like Fio and, our own podcast. We hope that we're on the forefront of a new movement in tech to just like dress for the job. That,
so if you see a capital allocator out there in casual clothes, maybe on a podcast, just send them a nice note in the replies. Just tell them like, love what you're saying, love your business model, but would it kill you to put on a suit?
Exactly.
Let's go to Josh Miller.
You're a capital allocator, not an HVAC technician.
Exactly. Let's go to Josh Miller. He says, I've said before, and I'll say it again, from antitrust to AI agents, 2025 will be the year of the web browser. More and more signs by the day. Interesting.
So I think this was in response to news. I think that there will actually, Chrome potentially being forced to spin out, which is very potentially very wild, just because Google is so, and all of Google's products are so deeply integrated into Chrome at this point. It's hard to imagine a Chrome that's sort of like account agnostic. It's probably not that hard to build, but you know that Alphabet's strategy was like, hey, like search is our golden goose. Let's build up these sort of like walls all around it via Android, via Chrome, so that like we're building up this sort of like fortress. And if it gets spun out, that'd be cool. Like Chrome has probably billions of users. Yeah. And I think
the Perplexity CEO was joking about buying it.
Yeah. Which would be funny.
Very funny.
Which would be a great scene of the simulation. Yeah. But yeah, like, you know, Josh and the browser company, like it's called the browser company for a reason. They were set up to like innovate in this area. And like,
oh, he's the CEO of the browser company?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense now. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so they built a fantastic browser. They're now focused on building sort of agentic browser products. Like, got it. I imagine, they haven't shared a ton yet, but it's products that will browse for you on your behalf.
Well, then this is kind of interesting because just recently they said that they were kind of pivoting away from Arc as a core browser product, but he's still very bullish about the web browser broadly. He just wants to find a different way to integrate.
So here's what the browser company needs to do. Find a SPAC. There's like hundreds out there. SPAC, buy Chrome. And suddenly Josh doesn't have to compete with the big bad Chrome. He can just be the Chrome.
I wonder how much Chrome's worth.
It's probably not cheap.
Because if you buy
as a standalone business,
I mean, I'm pretty sure isn't the deal for, doesn't Google pay Apple like
that's what I'm saying. So you buy Chrome and then you license
just to be the default search engine on iOS.
Yeah. No, it's 20. I thought it was 20
billion.
Yeah.
And so think about Chrome's got to be like almost in a similar install base size and maybe even more valuable or somewhat valuable. So like you have $20 billion of essentially
potential
infinite just net income. Like you run a multiple on that, like it's a $200 billion asset. Like something in that range.
Something
like it's
egregious.
A lot. It's not
hard.
$2
would
billion.
Be a big SPAC.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, I guess they could just do like a demerge and just have two tickers and they're just two independent companies.
That will what it would be have to be, but then what isn't then the new companies, like if they're beholden to their shareholders, isn't the most profitable thing that you could do just go relicense a product back to Google like you're talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly what I would do.
If you can't do that, then it's worth way less, right? You'd have to look at like Mozilla and some of these other big browsers and be like, well, what is this actually worth?
Yeah. Very interesting. Let's go to Jason Carman, fantastic filmmaker, good friend of mine and of the show. Jason says, most people don't realize how big of a deal Starship is. Ahead of today's Flight 6, here's a first look inside a new series I'm working on called Frontier Films. The first one is all about new space. And this actually got reposted by Elon. And it's amazing. Jason has crushed it and he's making like the documentaries are better than Netflix stuff now. Yeah. Like it's funny.
No, if Netflix is smart, they'll go and say, hey, the next series you do.
They should.
Just give it to
HBO,
us.
honestly.
Yeah.
Because
no, he's on that path and it's honestly the path that all media is going on to actually break into traditional media and like get the Netflix or the HBO or be on TV. You got to be big online first. Otherwise, like you just don't understand attention and like it's just too risky.
Yep.
So Jason is I think like he's carved out his own niche of like, I am a filmmaker in technology, which like the fact that when you think filmmaker and technology, I think of you and Jason. And in many ways, like you were like a YouTuber, right? More of a YouTuber. He's like filmmaker, multi-platform.
Oh yeah. I mean, his whole background is filmmaking. I kind of like chose YouTube because it was some white space. Like a lot of people had Substacks and I was like, I want to do something different. I'm kind of a camera nerd. This guy's been like making films his entire life, like dreaming of making films. And so super excited for where he's going with it. And it's funny because there is already a Netflix documentary about SpaceX, but it wasn't made from the perspective of someone like Jason, who's actually worked inside of a space company at Astronis and really gets it and really talks to the founders and the investors and understands the whole 360. So it's just going to be so much better. And you just know that it's going to rip. And he has a whole bunch of different products now. Like he started with the S3 series doing these like kind of micro company deep dives on like pretty early stage companies. But they were really, really polished, really great interviews. Then he did his interview series. Then he also did some flashback stuff where he did Bell Labs, and now he has these Frontier films. And so he's like fully building a new movie studio, essentially, like truly going into
and
this.
showing like how efficient it can be. Like he doesn't have some massive production company.
Well, it's because he's actually an individual contributor. Like he knows how to use a camera. He knows how to use a microphone. Like he doesn't need to spend, $100,000 on every single thing because he knows how to do it himself. He can do it solo, but then that allows him to hire the best. And so it's going to be massively successful.
He embodies the Technology Brothers mentality, which is doing it for the money, right? He's doing it for the love, but like this guy is going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars making important films, pushing humanity forward through, he's basically a marketing channel for a lot of really important companies. So thank you to Jason for doing what you do and doing it for the money.
Thank you, Jason. Let's go to Gary Tan. He says, this company went from 0 to 500K ARR in the last 8 weeks. Lots of people do AI due diligence for private equity, but this is the first one that outputs all the analysis natively in Excel files that analysts/principals can understand and modify from formulas up. And it's a repost of YC congratulating one of their portfolio companies.
Yeah, so this makes a lot of sense. Like anytime you can go after, like this company is replacing people that today make between like $80,000 and like $250,000 a year doing like just like keyboard work, like modeling. And it's one of those things like it will probably, maybe already is or very soon will be better outputs than like the humans that would do it. And for like a tenth or like even 5% of the cost, something.
But like importantly, it still allows you to have a tunable model at the end of the day. It's kind of like what was that company that Tegas bought? Was Canalist, I think it was the name. And Canalist would allow you to download a DCF that was kind of pre-populated with the metrics. There's always been Excel templates for various public companies. You can get like a CapIQ or Bloomberg integration to pull all those formulas in, but allowing a company to do this in the private markets with just like the proprietary data. And so much of the work is just scraping stuff out of differently formatted PDFs, differently formatted Excel sheets, just doing the translation. And that's where AI is like so valuable right now, just taking a bunch of messy stuff and copying it over and cleaning it up. Like that's where AI really flourishes.
And if you're an analyst or an associate and you're worried about AI taking your job, you should be looking at this being like, no, it's not going to take my job. I'm just going to do more deals, right? Exactly. So before it might have taken you a week to build this model or 24 hours, now you're going to be able to build it and get onto the next one. Right? It's just going to increase the velocity.
It's everything that we're seeing in art and filmmaking where you can accelerate with some AI generated music or some AI generated content or a fill in the background. Like there's still artistry. There's still going to be
you're making a deck and you need the right image for a certain slide and you just generate it instantly.
Exactly. And it's going to be the same thing with building these models. It's going to be something where you're just using this to fill in all the annoying problems that you would normally have to grind at for nights and weekends, and you can grind on nights and weekends on more deals. So we love that. Let's go to Pavel, Delian's brother. He says, very misunderstood by tech outsiders. A low-intention meeting with a successful person is net worse for you than not meeting with them at all. Networking is default harmful, makes you look like an NPC unless you have a clear agenda. That's a good point. Never heard this before.
Yeah, so anybody that meets Delian go, oh, you're Pavel's brother. Right? He's going to do that. Yeah. Pavel's his own man. But anyways, I think people don't. There's this obsession in tech of like trying to like climb the ladder and if I just meet this person and get in the room with them, I can like do something. And it's like people even use cold email to a fault. Like use cold email when you have a specific thing that you're trying to do with somebody, or you have a specific way to like add value to what they're doing or something you can offer them or something you can ask. Just it's a total waste of time to like meet people when there's no thing to do together.
Exactly.
So like nobody wants like. People in tech are generally like friendly, open to, outsiders, whatever. It's awesome, but don't like waste somebody's time by just being like, hey, I'd love to talk. It's nobody wants to just talk. We want to do things.
Naval talks about this, like you have an extremely high opportunity cost. There's that idea that like, your coffee meeting should be worth like $10,000.
Yeah.
And it's okay to come in with like, hey, look, I have an opportunity that together we could make $1 million. There's a 1% chance that it goes through. So yeah, this is a $10,000 meeting, as opposed to just like, I want to just pick your brain and figure it out. Like,
it's also important to understand, like if you're at a conference and there's like somebody like a billionaire there, right? And you're like, oh, I really want to meet this person. There's going to be like 20 other people like crowded around that person. And you have to understand that all those 20 people are like kind of making that person's life worse because they're just coming at them with just like a bunch of bullshit. And it's better to just be like, you know, not approach them then and cold email them or get a warm intro months later and be like, hey, you know, we overlapped at this conference, didn't get a chance to talk, social proof right there that you were in the right room. And then you can launch into your like, I'm building this thing, I'd love to like run it by you. And that's going to be a lot more effective of like actually building a relationship than just like, you know, coming onto them and being like, oh, I want to be friends.
Yeah. And there's something like a fine line about like being too transactional, like only talking to someone when there's something to be done.
Yeah, but I always talk, you know, I was talking with Sebastian from Rappi yesterday, and I told him something that I believe pretty strongly is like, if you're a busy person and the person that you're meeting is a busy person, you're only going to spend a lot of time with them if you're actually working on something, right? Like the best friendships are usually founded on like doing something productive together. And so I don't think it's wrong. It's not even necessarily transactional, but I don't think it's a bad thing that there's a lot of people in my life that I'm like, if I work on a specific deal or company, or even in this situation, we spend like 20 hours a week hanging out, and we wouldn't be doing that if we weren't making this podcast. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like we were friends before and we're friends now, but it's great to find reasons to be friends. You know?
Let's go to Liz Wessel, noted angel investor in Ramp.
Wow.
Secondary to that, I think she's a general partner at a big venture capital firm, but
that's cool too.
Less important than just ripping an angel check into Ramp.
Big.
She says, why do so many people become investors/partners and suddenly grow enormous egos? It's so obnoxious. You're not the only one who's special. Your founders are. I mean, I got to disagree with you there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're incredibly
important. I think capital allocators are very special. Imagine if all the capital allocators in the world just ceased to exist. Our entire global economy would come crashing down. Yeah.
We always say that, the working class gets far too much credit, and so does the founder class. We need to
there's so many with businesses
investors
that are R&D intensive. They cannot exist without. So I don't care if a founder has a pretty deck or a good idea or great pedigree. If they don't have a $5 million seed round, they're never going to achieve their dreams, which makes the venture capitalist absolutely critical to the process. And they should have a colossal ego. I don't think you should have a big ego if you have like a micro fund, like $400 million or something like that. But if you're getting up into the $1 billion AUM range, like build that ego up. You're just as important. As
like jokes aside, there is something very valuable about being a young founder and interacting with an extremely high ego investor, because at least there is some alignment there most of the time. So you can kind of get some reps in, deal with some sharp elbows, and deal with like, it's almost lower stakes than dealing with a high ego public company CEO who's going to buy your company or something like that. Like you've gotten the reps in and just realized like what a big ego is and how to deal with it. And but yes, obviously it's a little silly, especially if you haven't actually earned it and you've just become a partner because of your career.
I tell there's a specific investor friend of mine who has a few billion AUM, and he hides a lot of his like material success from his founders. And I'm like, dude, you realize that like people want to work with other winners, right? So like, if you're a winner and you're crushing it, like other people that are already winners or want to be will want to work with you. So I think it's important to just kind of like shatter that wall. And obviously having a huge ego is like not like there's no need for that. But I do think that ego is an edge, and we went through a period of business history where ego, like go ask like Michael Ovitz, like, hey, like, what do you think, did you have a big ego when you were building CAA? And he'd be like, I had a big ego. Like that's what drove me every single day. I mean, but the key is to have a big ego and be kind.
Of course. There's also a big difference between like materialism and like having nice things and having a big ego, like those can be very different. You can
totally
have a $100,000 watch and still have an appreciation for a really interesting Casio that costs $100, right?
Totally.
And being someone who understands like taste and opinionated decision making, even, and not just saying, oh, like this person has like a really expensive Hublot. That's not going to cut it, right?
No.
So
the other thing is there's a difference between, you can have a huge ego and still be very respectful.
Yep.
So a GP that's managing billions of dollars, they can have a huge ego because they're managing billions of dollars.
Yep.
They can still be respectful of founders, respectful of their time, kind in when they pass, or kind if, and respectful if there's a tough situation. So the key is to build the ego and, become a better, kinder person.
I really wonder who this subtweet is about. It's clearly about some investor partner, someone who just made partner on like, for no reason and is now just like running around being like, you fucking work for me. Hopefully it's not happening at her fund. Buco Capital bloke, he's been on the show before. He says, I heard someone say, here for the income, not the outcome today at work. And that pretty much nicely sums up what happens in tech when stocks really start ripping. 2021 vibes everywhere with 1K likes.
Yeah, a lot of people have been talking about, just the general,
vibe shift.
Who knew when 2021 and 2022, early 2022 were happening?
Yeah.
It didn't feel like we'd reached that level of frothiness again for at least a decade.
Yep.
And we prayed for a bubble.
Yep.
Like how many hours, right, were we praying to have another bubble and to get AI this quickly and in many ways get there's even a bubble in tech podcasting, right? No, but I do think it's this thing where these companies get to a certain size and suddenly it's become so hard to sort. Like I was talking to a founder today who's thinking about starting his own company, interviewing and would likely get an offer with OpenAI. And he was looking at it as like, well, I could go to OpenAI for a year, invest like a couple $1 million of stock and then be an OpenAI shareholder and then just build my company. So that's like the reality of like here for the income, not the outcome. He doesn't necessarily like, he's just getting it as like a call option, basically. Mercenary. But he's going to start a company. So good.
That's great. That's great. Let's go to Megan Nivold, first time on the show. She says, so once Ozempic gets to be cheap, will rich people start being fat again?
So how it used to be a status symbol to be overweight, like in the early,
I have a joke with some of my friends when they get fat. We say, looking prosperous.
Looking prosperous,
Looking prosperous.
Yeah, so the real contrarian move here.
Yeah, Peter Paul Rubens
if you want to
fat people, and it was a lecture. It showed that you had enough income to afford nice foods.
Yeah, so the real edge, if you're a capital allocator out there, add pronouns to your bio and get overweight, and you'll really stand out and kind of make a statement of like, I am contrarian. Yeah,
for sure. I wonder if there will be a future where, just like we discovered this miracle pill in Ozempic, there will be a miracle pill that will allow you to be extremely obese but suffer none of the health consequences.
That's alpha.
That's alpha. So you can just be physically intimidating.
Yeah.
Just walk around at 400 pounds. But
you're having to go to Patek and get like customized like bands because like it doesn't fit around your wrist.
Yeah. I do wonder.
Have you been through like a heavy like mass gaining period?
Many times.
There was a period when I first started going to the gym when I was 18, I would eat at the college cafeteria 3 times a day. Yep. I would wake up, have a protein shake, go to the gym, go to the cafeteria. Then I would get 2 peanut butter sandwiches that were bread with a puck of peanut butter. It was like a burger size, and I would eat 2 of those before lunch. Wow. At lunch, I'd go back to the cafeteria, eat a whole meal, and then I get 2 more sandwiches, and then I would go to dinner, and then I'd have 1 more sandwich and 1 more protein shake. So I was like literally having like 5,000 calories a day. Like it was just absurd.
It's fantastic.
And everybody should go through that. It's character building to go through because every single bite, you're like, I'm gonna throw up. I feel sick. Yeah,
but you gotta go through
prosperous. Look prosperous, everybody.
Prosperous, and then go through a cut, convert it all to muscle, and become a mass monster.
A mass monster, a size lord.
And then take Ozempic and get peeled and walk around at 5% Body fat. Yeah. We have a huge move in the talent world. This is actually massive. Fred Ursum, the founder of Coinbase, is welcoming Jeremy Barinholtz, who doesn't have an X account, sadly, as a co-founder of Nudge, linked to his post below. And so Jeremy Barinholtz is former Elon Musk associate at Neuralink, and I had the pleasure of meeting him, and he was truly one of the most impressive people I've ever met.
An absolute dog.
An absolute dog. Really, really incredible.
And Nudge is building an alternative to Neuralink focused on, improving.
Yeah, it's a non-implanted device. Yeah, so I think it's a headband that improves memory or something with the brain, interacts with the brain in some way, electrical stimulation. But fascinating guy. Went to Stanford. Was in the military, and I met him, and he looks just like the typical like San Francisco like thin programmer guy, and he was telling us that he's like extremely goal driven.
Yeah,
he sleeps for like 2 hours a night. Insane. And I was like, this is fake. Like there's so many red flags. Like I just don't buy this guy, what he's saying. And he was like, no, I'm extremely goal oriented. Like when I want to work on something, I just work on it constantly. And if I sleep, I'll just wake up and be like, I need to keep working on this. It's insane. Incredible. And he was like, yeah, one time I got really into working out and I got in this incredible shape and I looked like a professional bodybuilder. And we were like, yeah, right, dude. Like you're so skinny. Like this is impossible. And he showed us a picture and he was like the most jacked dude I've ever seen. It was insane.
Amazing.
Insane. And so he just...
Well, I hope they make the
He was working with the FDA stuff. He's electrical engineering, working on neuroscience, working on programming. You can go look up his GitHub. He's written a bunch of programming code. Like he is totally the real deal. Like really, really fascinating person. And so huge pickup for Fred.
I hope he leaves his mark on the Nudge. Like I'd love to just put on the Nudge headband and just like get some, even like 60% of that, like, mindset.
He really is like a special person. Like I left being, it was a big, like it was the Founders Fund CEO Summit. And there are a lot of very impressive people there. But he was someone that really, really stood out as a very, very interesting, like long tail person.
Yeah.
And I was very bullish on him. So
big pickup.
Very
I'm excited to see more about this company.
What he does. And I hope we learn more about him. He's very quiet and he was featured in one Ashley Vance article about Neuralink, and hopefully there's more, because I think the way he thinks about artificial intelligence and math and everything, it's like extremely valuable, and there's not enough of this like intellectualism that actually boils up. He's a very, very interesting thinker. So rooting for him.
Big pickup.
Let's go to Andre. He says, a preview of my new book, pre-order for $39.99. And it's 2 screenshots. It's how to build generational wealth on X.com. And the first page is, you can post the plane with red dots. You can quote tweet anything with this picture of the plane with red dots. It always does numbers. Even if people have no idea what it means, they will like and retweet to feign that they understand what's going on. And I think I replied to this, but like I would actually read this book. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
There are so many of these
and
formats
he should charge
that are interesting.
More.
He should charge more.
Yeah.
He should actually do it, or he should do it at least a huge thread of all the most viral slop.
I do think, viral slop.
It's the iPhone. This is the best feature Apple ever made, and it's filling in the text message 2-factor authentication
and the book
code.
could come with like a link to like a Dropbox where you could download all.
But they're not like high res. They're all reposted, like burnt in JPEGs that are super compressed and grainy.
No, I do think this is there's a lot of people that go on X and just start like posting and just like otherwise like very intelligent people that just do not understand how the platform works and like couldn't for the life of them create a banger even though they have good ideas. And so this could be like a book, a cohort based course, like in-person events, summits.
Get on WAP.
Get on WAP.com.
Get some Wi-Fi money going.
There's a 360-degree business to be built here.
I think so.
And you'd help a lot of people get post-economic just from posting.
I think so. I mean, we've seen some of those creator payouts. They get pretty big. Pretty big. You could fund your whole startup on it. Let's go to Keshav. He says, Paul Graham's whole life. I need money to paint. Learns programming, falls in love with Lisp, works briefly at Interleaf, starts via web to fund his painting lifestyle, sells to Yahoo for life-changing money, moves to California, then New York, tries painting, can't focus properly, feels lost, discovers writing essays online, creates YC. This is temporary. Then I'll paint. Builds Hacker News, gets stressed running online community, leaves YC to paint, tries painting in 2014, gives up mid-painting, codes Bell for 4 years, returns to essays in Lisp, moves to the UK, quote unquote, for a year, never leaves. It's so funny. There's so many people like this where it's like they have this idealized passion of themselves, like what they could be, but they're just like born to allocate capital or born to post or born to write or code. And he just clearly has so many fantastic skill sets. PG.
Yeah. Painting was always a fever dream, but thank God it stayed a fever dream, because otherwise we wouldn't have Y Combinator.
Yep.
And we'd live in a world where if you made a good app, you'd never have 50 competitors launching next year.
And you wouldn't have 50 VCs lining up to write your seed checks.
You never would have gotten the safe. Yep. You never would have gotten the 2-on-20
think about this,
seed round.
The impact he's had. I mean, I always think about YC as less of an investment vehicle. Like, they've had an impact on the investing space, obviously, but YC has become essentially a union for startups. Yeah. Because if you are a VC and you fuck over one YC company, you go in their database, every YC company hears about you, and instantly you're ostracized from the entire community. And it's such a large community
and
now.
The collective very, very bargaining approach of going, everybody goes out for 2-on-20.
Yep.
It's like, that's just the price, my friend.
It's funny you say 2-on-20, because like when I went through, it was like 1-on-10, and then it was like 1.5-on-15, and now it's 2-on-20.
But even back in the day with 1-on-10, that was probably felt like people were like, well, this is like egregious.
100%.
Like
it's always felt egregious.
Yeah.
It's always felt egregious. But
yeah. We'll know the money supply is expanded when YC companies are going out, where they're like, we're going out for 10 on 100.
There was one company in my batch who raised at 80, and everyone was like, wow, this is wild. And there's always like one company
How'd
that
they
just
do, though?
I don't think they actually did that well, but their numbers were crazy. It was like this company Virule. They did like viral videos, and I think they had a ton of revenue, because the guy who did it had been building like online advertising tech since he was a kid, and had like a bunch of like just made a lot of money through like online advertising. So was able to get the business to like a pretty big size. Do we have a promoted post?
Promoted post from our friends over at Ramp. Why settle for individual ingredients when Ramp gives you the full financial operations sandwich? They have corporate cards, expense management, accounts payable, procurement, travel. Look at this sandwich. It looks fantastic. We haven't eaten yet today.
It looks fantastic.
It's making my mouth water. And
it is a great way to articulate like the value of Ramp, that like it's the CFO suite. It's a bundle of tools. It's a compound startup that's multiple products all wrapped up in one. But my problem is that I don't think Ramp's a sandwich. I think it's a 9-course prefix with a wine pairing at the French Laundry.
Exactly.
I think it's premium. And when I think of Ramp, I don't think just some sandwich that your mom made for you and threw in a plastic bag on your way to school. I think, begging for a reservation, greasing the maitre d', valet parking your Turbo S, walking into the French Laundry, shaking hands with the chef, sitting down and enjoying an omakase.
Totally.
So Ramp, good post, but step it up with the classiness, because I want Ramp to be a premium brand.
Yeah, their social media manager is fantastic. Always good for a laugh. But 9-course meal, wine pairing, and the chef will even come out and say hello. Kareem will send you a note and say thanks for being a Ramp customer.
This is true.
Eric will send you a note.
Eric really will. Eric really is the CEO that comes
Eric
around.
will come and sit down at your table and have a conversation and make sure that your an NPS score is 100.
Yeah. I've always said that about the way Elon runs X now, where if you have a banger, he will come around and like just drop like a crying face emoji in the replies. Just be like,
and then it'll break your phone.
And it'll break your phone. But it feels like the chef coming out and being like, "Is everyone enjoying the meal? Is everyone enjoying the bangers today? Like, here's what's going on." And I just love that about the way he uses the product, because no previous CEO, not even Jack Dorsey, who was like totally in founder mode during his whole career, Like he didn't use the product that way. And Elon really used the product where he clearly consumes the stuff and comes out and is like, oh, is the soup good tonight? I'm tasting it. Oh, let me have some of this whiskey too. Like we'll share some of this. Like, is the wine working? Oh, it's a little corked. Like let's adjust the algorithm. Yeah. It's good. And
adjust the algorithm.
And I think the Ramp guys are doing the same thing. Let's go to Logan Bartlett. He says, MicroStrategy has now passed its dot-com bubble stock price and is an $82 billion business. Get him on the podcast, Logan. This is an $82 billion software company. You interview the largest public company tech CEOs. You got to get Saylor on the pod.
Get him on the pod.
Pod.
No, MicroStrategy has a fantastic business model. For every dollar of Bitcoin they buy, they get $3 of enterprise value. And so if they're smart and they're serving the shareholders, they'll just do that over and over and over forever.
Yeah.
And then if Saylor's like really bullish, he'll do a take private at a nice premium because he's just like, I'm so long, I'm happy to pay 3x
for the Bitcoin
because I can use more leverage on the take private.
Oh my god, yeah, it's wild. The funny thing is that there are a number of companies that have done this exact chart. Akamai, do you know Akamai? The networking company, they invented like IP routing and stuff. It's like this MIT company, fascinating. And they were worth like 20 billion during the dot-com boom. A couple of the guys sold. They only worked there for like 6 months during the run-up.
Crazy.
Just became generationally wealthy. And then it took the company like 20 years to build back up, but it was a solid business with solid technology. And so they finally got to their peak like more recently.
It's good to have
a bit of a different story with MicroStrategy, but respect.
At least having that up and down, like you get like a nice, the number that you have to hit again to get any level of respect, right?
Yeah. We go to TCP, Tech CEO Pepe. He says, daily affirmation, I will fire an intercontinental ballistic missile. And I love this. I believe you'll be able to do it, although the ICBM might not be holding a nuclear weapon inside of it. It might be SpaceX point-to-point. You might be riding on that. You might be going from New York to Tokyo in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But ICBMs, I saw another post. SpaceX is just a wrapper around ICBMs. I like that. Make the ICBM useful again. We need to be firing these things off. They can't just be sitting on nuclear submarines doing nothing.
I know. Total waste.
Total waste.
You can just, in the same way that you can just do things, you can just manifest things and you can just affirm things.
Yep.
I think it's a very, it's been well studied to this point. Like you should be leveraging this in different ways, but don't do it in the ways that people in LA do it, where they're like, I am healthy, I am happy, I am like,
you step it up.
You step it up. I will find the $100 million hidden in my computer.
Yep.
I will find the $100 million hidden in my computer.
Speaking of that, let's go to Atlas Creatine Cycle. It's a screenshot. It says, there is $100 million stuck in your MacBook. Your job is to figure out how to get it. And he says, there is $100 million stuck in SF. Your job is to break up with your GF, move there with your best friend, and start a GPT wrapper.
Yes.
Let's go.
More rappers. There aren't enough rappers.
There aren't enough.
Genuinely. Just go. If you don't have a good idea,
just start there.
Go make an app in the App Store called Chat GPT.
Chat.com GPT.
Or something like that. And it's just Chat GPT. Reskin, put in the App Store.
No, it's not even Chat GPT. It's Llama, probably.
yeah, it's Llama.
Llama on a
and just charge the most.
Yeah.
Have some, put some good branding on there. Spend a ton of money on paid ads.
Yep.
If you spend $1 on paid ads and you generate $1 and $1 of revenue, just keep doing that forever.
Scale
till you're a billionaire or a centie.
Yep.
There's nothing stopping you. You don't need to be that creative. You just need to work harder.
Yep. I love it. Thanks, Creatine Cycle. Always good to have you on the show. Let's go to Isaac. Isaac says, this time 2 years ago, my timeline was filled with business banter, hot takes, bad takes, random shit posts. Now it's crickets. I came to Twitter for business shenanigans, and more it feels like it disappoints. I won't be leaving, but I hope it changes. Well, you're disrespecting X by calling it Twitter. That's your first mistake, Isaac.
Yeah.
Also, be the change you want to see in the world.
Maybe
why don't you start posting business banter instead of complaining?
So Isaac is a friend and and fantastic entrepreneur. He actually made his first million selling swords
really?
Online.
Oh, sick.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he has a company called Mini Katana that he bootstrapped using these like crazy viral hacks
Fantastic.
on YouTube, making original content. He's now building a candy company. I think that Isaac, I've said this before, but he's really like he's the next Willy Wonka.
Awesome.
So if you have all the VCs out there that have like a Willy Wonka thesis, go find Isaac. His company's awesome. His facility where he manufactures everything is like only a few miles from here. But yeah, I haven't necessarily experienced this. Like the For You page, like definitely
it's
changed.
a little messy.
It's
especially
messy.
during the election.
It's messy.
It's all
There's
politics.
a lot of slop.
But that's why we're doing the show. Like follow
use that.
Tech Bros Pod. Like we are posting business hot takes. We never post bad takes. A lot of random shit posts, but there's a lot of content.
No social commentary, no political commentary.
We never talk about
purely
politics.
Business and technology and
exactly.
finance. And so the comment section, even on this post, I'm at, when we quote tweet this, there's going to be a lot of like, hot takes.
Yep.
And anyways, good to call this out, but use the not interested button when they try to put some slop in your For You page. Say not interested,
block,
not interested,
mute,
not interested.
It does require curation. You're building a Zen garden. You want to avoid some things. I mean, I have a series of lists now. I often look through the For You page a little bit. I find that like the first 10 posts are usually pretty good. And as you go farther down, it just gets sloppier and sloppier because it's just randomly sorting. But then switch over to the following tab. Got some good people in there. I also have a list just for the people that I know post great stuff. I want to see everything that they post. So I put that in there. Also, just spend more time online. That's probably the problem.
Yeah.
Do we have a promoted post? Let's
promoted post from our friend Jackson Dahl. Jackson says, I'm excited to announce
this is big.
Dialectic Podcast, an interview podcast with the sharpest, most creative and original people I know. He says, I like to spar with people on their ideas and push them deeper, ultimately to understand what makes them themselves. He's already got episode 1 out. He's got a cool graphic here. And Jackson is somebody that has one of those people where you talk to like very high like insights per minute, right? Sure. So if you're having like a 10-minute conversation with him, you're going to have like a bunch of he's going to give a bunch of interesting point of views and takes. So the podcast is awesome. Listen to a little bit of the first episode. Anyways, very I think this is just like he's one of those things. It's very strong like founder market fit in the context of like a podcast. Sure. Like looking at this as like a media business, like he's gonna have no problem just like making the show fantastic.
Is he monetizing already? That'd be my
number
one risk factor for him.
Maybe we should be the first advertiser. Maybe, because as much as we like to juice our show with ads, like we should be advertising quite a bit. So
I agree.
Jackson, if you don't have any advertisers yet, we'd love to
make
get
something
involved.
happen. Let's go to Adam Graham. First time on the show. He says, the amount of high quality content that Tech Bros Pod is putting out is insane. Banger after banger. This is why they're the most profitable podcast. Hell yes, Adam.
Let's go.
This is exactly why we do everything that we do. We do it for the money, really.
For the money.
We do it for the money.
If there's bangers as a byproduct, then that's fantastic.
Yeah. And high quality content, if that's what makes the money, we'll do it. But just to be clear, if low quality content's more profitable, expect some low quality content.
Here and there.
Yeah. But good to have you as a fan. Good to have you as a follower. Good to have you on the show. Welcome to the Tech Bros community.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Adam.
Let's go to Nick Carter. He says, locked in and pulled another all-dayer today.
Let's
no naps.
Go.
Let's go, Nick.
Let's go. The only time I've ever taken naps during the workday, like I was like probably like devastated. Like I've had to be in like a really bad spot. Like, to be so strung out.
I take like one nap a quarter on like a Sunday, and it's wonderful, but I'm not a daily napper. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, naps are. I get it if you're like Paul Graham and you're working on your painting career and you're trying to get like a, burst of energy for the afternoon, but I don't know any.
Also, it's kind of impossible to take naps when you're on enough stimulants to kill a horse.
That's a big part thing. Of it. I think anybody's that's like, oh, I should take a nap. It's like try
600 milligrams of caffeine and
some nicotine.
4 milligram nicotine pouches all day long.
There you go. You won't be
inclined to nap. You'll be pulling all dayers every single day.
All dayers daily.
But I love Nick. quintessential you can just do things guy. Did the boxing match, did the investigative journalism, huge capital allocator. Love Nick.
Amazing.
Does a bunch of cool stuff. Fantastic.
Student of capitalism.
Let's go to my colleague Bridget Harris over at Founders Fund. She's quoting Peter Thiel. Says the Wall Street banks are long the trade deficit because the bigger the deficit, the more money they make. And she says, obviously, bigger trade deficit equals larger volume of cross-border payments. Stablecoins could be hugely helpful here in helping smaller banks compete with cross-border flows. Large banks have no incentives besides defensive to switch because of this dynamic. Lower fees equals less profit, among others. Has to be a smaller player / new entrant with nothing to lose plus favorable legislation because the incumbents won't cannibalize themselves unless pressure comes from the outside. And love you, Bridget, but you made a terrible mistake. You included a link to Spotify, which is banned on X, and that's why you only got 99 views. So turn this into a clickbait thread, repost it, I'll retweet it, and
we'll go
to the moon. We'll cover it again. I think you got 1,000 likes easy on this. If you just make it a little bit more incendiary, you need to call someone out.
Piss some people
They're the
off.
reason America's stagnating. This is the problem. You got to be much more aggressive.
Yeah.
But honestly, a very thoughtful post and something that really digs into all of the features of stablecoins and all of the different factors going on there. I was not aware of all this, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with stablecoins. So far, it seems like the fees, Stripe's obviously made their move into stablecoins. Yep. We'll see like what I've seen like some stablecoin products that just still have like similar fees to like traditional payment processing, but it'll be a pretty cool experiment to run to just be like, all right, if you can move money basically for free in this sort of trustless way, how much does that accelerate the velocity of money? And I would imagine it'll be pretty significant.
Yep. I mean, it still seems like we're pretty early in all of the crypto stuff. Like even Bitcoin, it's unclear, like, is it putting pressure on certain parts of the US government? Yep. Like it's become a political issue and there's pro Bitcoin or anti Bitcoin communities, but we haven't really worked through because we're not on the gold standard. Like if Bitcoin displaces gold, how does that really trickle through the rest of the American economy? Like,
well,
now
there's rumors of the strategic
Bitcoin reserve. That would be big.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. But Bridget has a fantastic post on Pirate Wires, deep diving the Stripe acquisition of was it Bridge?
Yeah.
It's confusing because it's Bridget and Bridge, but the stablecoin platform that got acquired. And so you should definitely go read that if you want to learn more about stablecoins. Let's go to the founder of Perplexity. He was demoing a new Perplexity product for shopping, which I love. You can just take a picture of something and then Perplexity will go and find the product that you're searching for. And in this case, he asked, what watches does Jeff Bezos wear? And Perplexity helped him realize that Bezos is often wearing the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moon Watch and another watch. And he says, should I buy this? And I think the answer is absolutely you should buy it. We need more technologists and founders who are watch guys. We've seen this happen with Zuck. He's rocking a fantastic FP Journe. We know some capital allocators who are rocking Pateks and Nautilus and Aquanauts at this point,
APs.
But it's still under discussed and there's still major alpha in getting into the watch game.
It needs to be more a part of the conversation.
Exactly. So I highly recommend this. You need to differentiate. You're in brutal competition with every other big tech company, bro. You need to stand out. Get a nice piece. Get a hitter.
Get a hitter.
Yeah. And then every time you go and shake someone's hand, when you go shake Jensen's hand for those GPUs that you need, he's going to be like, ooh.
Because even people that aren't watch guys, they're still going to notice and respect it.
Exactly.
And it's a way to make an impression.
Yeah. So I say pull the trigger. Let's go to Yarden Shafir. He says, I'm outside the club. A drunk girl is yelling her opinions on Rust. I have hit peak San Francisco. Wow, 7K likes. Let's go.
There we go. Tech is mainstream.
People like Rust. I've never written a line of Rust. I know it's a very popular language. really popular with crypto, I think. I'd really appreciate it if people can stop being transphobic in my comments. Go do that someplace else if you must. Yeah, of course, this turned into a culture war issue. It's more
as
of an
soon
issue
as
than
anything
tabs
past,
versus spaces.
anything past 1,000 likes, it turns into
you're in the dark territory.
Culture war zone.
Dark X.
Try to keep your likes under 1,000
yeah,
if you don't want politics and social issues.
Yeah, you want low TAM bangers. Just the people that know consistent, or else it's going to get too crazy. But I mean, it's interesting because sometimes like the drunk girl outside of a club, I remember in Miami seeing a drunk girl talk to a bouncer about Bitcoin, and it was right at the peak when Bitcoin was at 20K, and then it immediately sold off afterwards. So there is a little bit of like when your barber is giving you stock or your taxi driver is giving you stock tips, like maybe that's a signal.
But this is a signal that SF is back.
I think so.
The fact that somebody went out in San Francisco, presumably past 10 p.m., is a really bullish sign. So,
I wonder if that's real or if that was just like an imagined scenario.
You can just make up things.
Let's go to Beth Jezos. He says, bioac is the next Overton frontier. Phew.
Yeah. So, you've been a strong proponent for literally years for genetically engineering bears to domesticate them and also make them, allies for us. And
also biohacking and stimulants and all sorts of stuff in that world. But yeah, it's interesting to see where this goes. What's interesting is like the Overton frontier. Is he just saying like that is where the political issues are being fought right now, like over IVF, over what Noor Siddiqui is doing at Orchid, over like genetically engineering babies, like that type of stuff? Because Overton, I usually think of the Overton window as like what is acceptable to say politically. So it seems like what he is saying here is maybe that there are things that are going on in the bioaccelerationist community that you can't talk about, or you would be canceled if you talked about. And this is like the rumor that there are genetically engineered children in China right now, but not in America. Have you heard this?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that it's like maybe we're going to have a national conversation about the morality of bio in the same way that we have had it around AI.
There needs to be a conversation. There's certainly I could get on the hat for
put on the tinfoil hat.
But there's many people like one of the sort of pushback against this. There's many people that believe that Lyme disease was created in a lab,
really,
because it basically spread out of this small area around. Like Long Island, there was a island off of
like Manhattan,
like Montauk area.
Interesting.
And dogs would wash up on like in Montauk that were like a dog combined with a pig. And
what?
Like that. Like very weird.
This is the most crazy conspiracy theory I've ever heard.
Stuff, but Lyme disease also spread out from sort of like that was the geographic center. And the ticks that initially had it would sort of spread out from there.
I'm terrified of ticks and Lyme disease. Whenever I'm on the East Coast, I always avoid going for hikes and stuff. I'm like, no.
Huge West Coast alpha. It's just like having less.
There's something scary about having like something so small have such a huge impact on you.
No,
right?
it just almost
like spiders
your life.
and snakes. I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
Anyway. Hopefully we'll hear some more stuff about biological accelerationism. I think we need a good blog post from somebody. I mean, a little bit of that's happening with Neuralink and probably Nudge and a few other programs. And so putting all that together into kind of like, we need like a Packy deep dive or something. Be cool.
Some things just need a Packy deep dive.
They do. Jeff Lewis says, I believe that in the future will be governed predominantly by algorithms. Phase 1, algorithms accumulate power, 2000 to 2020. Phase 2, governments attempt to wrest power from or align themselves with algorithms, 2020 to present. Phase 3, algorithms become the government.
So Jeff has a special talent for looking at, there's that phrase like how to predict the future is to like sort of like look at the present, right? And in many ways, like he positioned this tweet in a sort of like incendiary way of being like 2000 to 2020, right? Algorithms gaining power.
Yep.
But yeah, I buy this. I feel like we're already seeing the governments align themselves with different algorithms, right? You saw that this election cycle, but I would just say I want to live in a world where the temp check algorithm runs the country, right? Vibes based governance and Jeff, we've told you this already, but bring back TempCheck.
We need it.
Some of the best VC content market. I know you're not a VC.
Fantastic.
Best VC content marketing in the game.
It was fantastic.
Classics and some low TAM bangers in there. So
yeah, this is kind of the Brian Johnson question right now. He's been asking a lot of people.
He says that don't die is an algorithm, and like that's what he's really creating. And
also he's been asking a lot of people, like, if you could guarantee that an AI would give you like a better life outcome, would you submit to the AI dictator?
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting philosophical question that I think we'll be digging into more over the next few years. So definitely the right question to be asking.
Yep.
Go to Matt Turk. He says, okay, but we dramatically improved our podcast game. And it's a response to TechCrunch. In 2023, VCs returned the lowest level of capital to their investors since 2011. And so the 2023 was not a good year for venture capitalists. But there were a lot of great podcasts that came out of this era. And
actually, I would say that in many ways, maybe the carry checks were lower, but big funds were still being raised.
Yep. The fees were high.
The fees, stayed stable.
And so why not put those fees into a Shure SM7B or some cinema cameras or a lovely set? Why not? But we do need more venture capitalist podcasts. I've noticed this when I've looked at, like, if you're a VC or a company and you want to go do a press junket, it's actually pretty hard to go do 10 solid interviews that have, a reasonable following. Like, if you're a celebrity and you're promoting a movie, you can go do Kimmel, Fallon, Colbert. Like, you can do, NBC and CBS and, The View and all of these different things to promote your show. And they all have large followings. And in terms of like VC world, there's really not that much. There's a few shows that are pretty big. A lot of them don't have guests. It's not like you can just call up all in and go on. 20 VC does those.
There's the TechCrunch one, but it's not like you're going to go and get these sort of like super influential hosts.
Yeah. And it is really important for founders to be able to like work their way up and start with a smaller show and then parlay that into the bigger show and then wind up on the big show. But it's really, really
the same
hard.
way that tech founder Donald J. Trump finally was able to claw his way up onto Rogan.
Yeah, exactly. And there needs to be a similar path, but it's hard because Dwarkesh is so focused on AI, and Lex occasionally, he had the Cursor founders on, but he hasn't, I don't think he's even had Palmer Luckey on. There's there's not really that many just general tech shows. Like Logan Bartlett, a great show, but it's like now narrowed down to just like public company SaaS CEOs, which is cool.
Yeah, and that's why we started this podcast. We felt like the technology industry needed a podcast.
It did. So let's go to the real estate god. The real estate god says, craziest thing in America is that the average person could 2 to 5x their salary simply by taking a sales role, but they're too scared of people telling them no 20 times a day. Interesting. I think that's true.
It's funny. Sales is one of those things, like in a lot of things, if you're getting told no 20 times a day, like you should just like stop doing what you're doing, because the market is telling you like
you're doing something wrong.
You're doing something bad. Like it sucks. But sales is like one of those things, like the no tolerance needs to be extreme, mostly because like sometimes like even customers that want your product like don't want to deal with you right now, or they just have 10 other things that are more important, so you're never going to break through. Someone else shared something recently that was like, in the future, I forget who posted this, but in the future, you're going to be getting 2,000 perfect cold emails a day from all the outbound sales agents, and Salesforce is going to be like taking you out to like a steak dinner, and they're like, so we're going to renew your contract, we're going to increase it like by like 50%, like here's, just sign right here, and you're like, all right, like I guess this is what we're doing.
It's fantastic. Let's go to Jen. She says, overheard 3 tech bros discussing how much money it would take for them to replace their girlfriend. Thing is, none of them even currently have a girlfriend.
Boom. Roasted.
Roasted.
Got him.
Technology brothers, tech bros. Get girlfriends, dude. Figure it out.
Girlfriends.
And don't let people overhear you talking about embarrassing things. Although, could be imagined. Could be a fake overheard. This thing happens.
You never know.
It's a proven. That goes in the how to post bangers, how to create generational wealth on X.
Red Bull futurist exemplifies what a technology brother is.
Yes.
He's over here talking about wanting to have 10 children, right? So he can't, there's nothing like no AI girlfriend, friend.com is not going to replace, having a loving wife and partner and mother of your children.
Until there's some crazy bioaccelerationism and
we're domesticating
womb.
bears.
Yeah.
Artificial wombs.
Let's go to Jenny Fielding. She says, a pre-seed company that raises a modest round should not be burning more than $50K per month. This is a hill that I'm willing to die on.
Well, don't die, Jenny. There's money to be made.
Yeah.
But this goes back to your $17,000 pre-seed back in the day.
If we were burning $50K, that would be 1 week. It would be out of money in 1 week.
1 week, no.
Yeah.
I think that this is the challenge with venture, right? Money that is raised gets spent, and it's ridiculously hard. One of my portfolio companies just raised a round basically off of a lot of momentum, and there's already this like, oh, well, we could hire this person, and we could like this person's amazing, and look what they're gonna do, and then suddenly this company will have added like $1 million a year of burn that they didn't really need, or maybe they could have pushed it back down the road. This is where like YC is like dogma is just absolutely correct, which is just like keep burn incredibly low, and it's so hard as somebody who started a company in 2021 and
I never even realized that YC PG wrote this post, and I believe it was called Don't Die.
Yeah.
And now Brian Johnson's using that in like the literal sense, but the original PG thing was just don't die, don't run out of money, and as long as you do that and you stay an entrepreneur, eventually you'll figure it out.
There's a company that I backed in 2021, and only 3 people invested in the company. YC, or I invested in one other guy invested, and then YC did their round, and they've pivoted like 10 times, but all of their updates are like, we pivoted again. And it's like monthly burn, like runway. And it's just been it's been like $8K a month burn plus like server costs. And their runway has just been like dwindling down like very slowly, but they've taken so many shots. Like I'm eventually expecting to get an update from them. It's like, we have 10 million of ARR. Like we pulled it off.
I love that. But
they would have had way less shots on goal.
Yeah. But I mean, seriously, like it is difficult to create an axiom around burn rate, because if you're doing something that's R&D intensive, or you're going to spend a lot of money on lawyers, or you're acquiring a domain, or if there's something weird going on, like it's going to be very bespoke. Some companies are completely justified in burning 100K a month out of the gate, and some companies shouldn't be burning more than 10K out of the gate. It just really depends on what you're doing and who your team is and where you are. But in general, I agree. You should be conscious of your burn. So great post.
We certainly
Thanks
are at this
for
podcast.
Participating. And let's end with one more promoted post, and then we'll go to Lulu.
This promoted post is from DuPont Registry. DuPont
Fantastic.
has a 2024 911 GT3 RS. This is not the first time we've had DuPont
RS
as a promoted post, and not the first time we've had a GT3 RS on here. This one is a paint to sample pastel orange that comes fitted with custom 1016 Industries carbon fiber kit. Ooh. This car looks fantastic. We eventually will be doing a transcontinental race as Technology Brothers, probably with a ramp branded car.
GT3 RS.
And
probably Gumball 3000.
Gumball 3000.
Maybe the Dakar as well.
Yeah, so there's a few big races coming up in our pipeline, and we're certainly going to be I'll be driving a Porsche. You might be driving something American, but that will be we'll each die on that hill.
Yes.
But anyways, fantastic example. Thank you to DuPont for.
And how much is it?
It's listed at 490,000.
Wow, an absolute steal.
An absolute
at that
steal.
Price, you can't afford not to buy.
Yeah, they're basically giving this away.
Yeah.
I would make sure to get your PPI.
Yeah.
Because. I don't know, pastel orange PTS. This could easily get into the 500s. But thank you to DuPont. And
I mean, if you have if you're, an entrepreneur, or then you can pick it up. But if you're, a capital allocator with some small $400 million fund, like that's a no-brainer.
No brainer.
Let's go to Lulu. She says, taste aside, from a purely strategic perspective, this brand marketing is disastrous for Jaguar. For context, Jaguar sales have been plummeting, down 70% in the US in 5 years. Did you hear that they took a year off of making cars?
Yeah.
They just are not making cars for a full year because they're just completely resetting. Up to 2018, Jaguars was actually growing quickly, doubling sales in a few years. And she breaks down all the disaster that came from this post that was called Copy Nothing. And it was a very abstract ad, looked like a music video almost, with a lot of interesting characters. It got a ton of attention, and I think Lulu's post got more than the Jaguar post in terms of likes. Lulu got 16K on this, and she kind of breaks down the problem that Jaguar used to be the iconic image of an old school British gentleman. Think Sir Roger Moore. It was James Bond level car, and then they kind of messed around and wound up with kind of shifting from being in the luxury and classic sophistication market with competing with Bentley and Aston Martin. And then they shifted down to premium, competing with BMW and Mercedes in a more crowded market. But Jaguar SUV sales are cannibalized by their own sister company, Range Rover. And now they're not upscale enough to compete in the luxury market and not cutting edge enough to compete in the premium market.
Yeah,
and
so they have
need to
this
reset.
sort of,
they need to focus on the cars.
Yeah, they have this vicious cycle where you have lower sales, which means you can invest less in R&D, and you're not even producing parts at the same scale, which means that the parts end up being more expensive for you, and it's this crazy vicious cycle. And then it almost feels like this campaign is not like a nail in the coffin, but how do you completely turn off an entire new generation of automotive enthusiasts where I've never once considered buying a Jaguar, except every now and then you'll see like a Jaguar is like leasing, and they're like, we will pay you $1,000 a month to lease this car. They're like so like bottom, like they can't give these cars away.
Yeah.
They stopped making cars for a year because their sales were like basically zero.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize like sales volumes on cars are not even that high. Aren't the
Waymos Jaguars?
Yeah, the Waymos are Jaguars. Waymo should just
buy them.
Jaguar.
Because at least they can make cars. And
because at least they can make cars.
That seems like the end of the road here.
Yeah, that seems like the end state. That's the only time you really see a Jaguar. But
if they wanted to revamp the brand, they shouldn't have done this crazy video. They should have hired someone like who Hyundai hired, who was the former developer of the M label at BMW, and he created the N group at the performance group of Hyundai, and they're creating like insane cars like the Ioniq 5N. Have you seen this with the fake noise, and like all the car guys love it, even though it's electronic, even though it's electric vehicle, it sounds like a V6 and it like shifts like a V6, has this fake DCT in there, and then they're also doing this crazy Envision car that looks like
the super nostalgic one.
Super nostalgic. And so there are a bunch of ways that they could have gone into the vault and brought something back that stood out and made a statement as a car. But they just chose not to. Maybe this will be the start of something new, but it was a very weird brand direction. And it doesn't.
No, it did. Somebody was commenting, and I think this was accurate. Like, it's almost like they were expecting like a Kamala win, and they had invested like tens of millions into this campaign, and they were just like, all right, we already made it. Like, we bet the house on this. And then everybody's like, no, like, you realize that like Trump won, right? But we don't talk about politics on this podcast. So we will leave it at that. But Jaguar could be a good acquisition target for us at some point. The history of the brand aligns with a lot of our ethos. So somebody will bring it back. Sometimes it just takes an extra decade. So.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe, or else you'll be relegated to a life of flying on net jets.
Ouch.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.